Chapter 525. The miners came one by one, and Ling Han also gave them food, dispelling their worries, and told him everything he wanted to know. It turned out that leaving the mine pit meant dying the next day, but it didn't mean that staying didn't mean they wouldn't die. Here, some people died suddenly after only 3 or 4 days, while others could live for 10 days to half a month, but without exception, they would all die in the end. But as long as people lived, they would struggle at death's door. They still had to fight to fill their stomachs. The guards didn't dare to enter the mine pit, so they could only use food to exchange for the ores they mined. They exchanged at the boundary of the mining area, tossing it to each other, and I'll toss it to you. However, no one dared to hide their food and bring it to the mining area, because it would be snatched clean by others at any moment. They ate it immediately once they got it, not leaving a single bit behind. Although this was a mine pit, there wasn't much of that kind of blood-red ores, so some people had very tough lives. They didn't die from the curse, but died from hunger and thirst. But for those who died here, no one would want to eat their corpses, because the flesh of the dead was black, and there was poison or something. Anyway, whoever ate it would die. Thus, other than some evil acts of cannibalism at the beginning, there were no more incidents later. Not everyone worked hard to mine ores. Some people formed gangs, or thought they were strong enough, and started to rob others. However, the people here died too quickly, and whatever gang or elite they were, they would soon disappear. When Ling Han heard this, he didn't know what to feel. "They are so pitiful," Hunyo said. He didn't expect this little girl to sympathize with others. Ling Han rubbed Hunyo's head, and said, Nyo has grown up, and knows to care for others. However, they can't steal Nyo's food to eat. Hunyo immediately defended her sovereignty. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said to the miners, "Did you guys dig any ores? Sell me a piece." He took out a pile of food and clean water. "I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you too. Buy mine." The miners hurriedly squeezed forward and took out the blood-red stones from their bodies. They were all pitifully small, and the biggest one was only as thick as a little finger. These people were all afraid that Ling Han would not be satisfied, so they all looked at him with hopeful eyes, afraid that he would say no. The food that Ling Han gave them was much more delicious than the food that the guards outside gave them. Ling Han's heart was filled with complicated emotions. It was only some food, yet it actually caused them to be so submissive. He distributed the food to everyone and put away the ores. He could hold them in one hand, and there was very, very little of them. He held the ore in his hand and immediately felt the flower of martial art in his body become extremely greedy. It wanted to devour and absorb these stones. To be exact, it wanted to devour some kind of substance within the stones. Just at this time, 5 large men walked out from the mine. When they saw the food in everyone's hands, they immediately revealed ferocious expressions and shouted, "All of you, hand over the food." "Brother Yang, there's also a little girl," one of the large men said, pointing at Hunyo. A woman." Brother Yang immediately licked his lips when he mentioned Hunyo. "I like this kind of girl the most. Haha, I've been cooped up here for more than 10 days. Today, not only can I have a good meal, I can also have some fun." Ling Han sighed. In this mine, the ugliness of human nature was infinitely magnified. Living a life where there was no tomorrow, who couldn't release the evil in their hearts? Anyway, I don't have many days to live, so why not do as I please for once? This Brother Yang was obviously a typical example. However, this person's fate was really tough. He'd been here for more than 10 days, and his life still hadn't been taken. This was like the old saying, bad people live for 1,000 years. When it came to these 5 people, the miners were all trembling. These 5 people were notorious. It was said that before they came, they were already the tyrants of this area, but they still couldn't die. God was really too blind. They'd already fallen to such a state, but were still bullied by these scum. "Little beauty, Big Brother will take you to have some fun." Brother Yang stared at Hunyo, almost drooling. "If the heavens don't accept you, then I will," Ling Han said with a light humph. With a tap of his finger, Pu, a hole appeared on Brother Yang's forehead, piercing through the back of his head. Fresh blood spurted out, mixed with white brain matter. Everyone was stunned at first, then the four large men immediately screamed. If they didn't hear it with their own ears, it was really hard to imagine that four big men would actually scream like a sissy. They turned and fled, knowing that they'd encountered a tough opponent. "All of you stay." Ling Han flicked his finger, and four flashes of sword chi shot out. Pu, the four instantly fell to the ground, completely dead. The miners all looked at Ling Han with reverence in their eyes. They were also filled with gratitude. This was because if Ling Han had displayed his strength, they would definitely have answered him honestly. However, Ling Han chose to use food to exchange with them. It was clear that he was treating them like humans. So they were still people. The eyes of these miners burned with a hint of vigor. So they weren't walking corpses, waiting for death to descend. In Ling Han's eyes, he had already made up his mind. He would immediately go and communicate with the Fire Emperor and Na Zhiyan so that they would give up on the idea of continuing to mine the mine. Then, he would draw all the miners into the Black Tower, purify the curse on them, and let them leave. They were only some ordinary people, so how could they discover the secret of the Black Tower? They would only feel that they had slept, and then everything would return to normal. With his mind set, Ling Han walked back. The martial Dao immortal flower in his body was already reaching its limit, and it had a strong desire to devour these ores. Ling Han tried to refine the smallest of the ores, and a strange power was instantly extracted from the ore. This power entered his dantian, and was then absorbed by the martial Dao immortal flower. The vein-like patterns on the divine flower shone, and a surge of blood chi rose up, growing slightly. The extent was pitifully small, but Ling Han could be sure that the martial art divine flower had indeed grown a little. However, a bloodthirst also rose up in him, and he had the urge to use violence. This was very shocking. One had to know that the growth of the martial art divine flower could not be separated from the understanding of martial art. Without a deeper understanding of martial art, the divine flower would never be able to grow, and the final result would be to give birth to a baby. Ling Han had a complete experience of martial art, so he naturally did not need to comprehend martial art. However, for others, comprehension of martial art was the most important thing after advancing into the flower blossom tier. But these ores could allow cultivators to bypass them. Inconceivable. If there were more of these ores, then wouldn't they be able to easily create flower blossom tier, spiritual infant tier, or even shattering void tier elites? Ling Han immediately sent the remaining ores into the Black Tower, and said, "Small tower, analyze what these are." Bo Wenlin instantly looked wary. Previously, he had not made a move because he felt that Ling Han was not to be trifled with. And now, this guy who was not to be trifled with only half a day to live, which was even worse. Who would be willing to risk their lives against someone who was definitely going to die? "Youngster, you are already a dead man, and I can't be bothered to lower myself to your level. However, I will follow you and watch you die," he said. Ling Han revealed a mischievous smile, and said, "Do you really dare to follow me wherever I go?" There are places in this world that I, Bo Wenlin, do not dare to go." Bo Wenlin laughed coldly. "Then come." Ling Han smiled, and strode forward in the direction of the imperial city. Meanwhile, Bo Wenlin also stopped the guards here. Otherwise, how could these people be a match for Ling Han? Ling Han did not walk quickly, and only entered the imperial city after about half an hour. Hurry, we've captured 2 female assassins, and are about to publicly execute them at the eastern gate." He had just entered when he heard passers-by rushing to report the news. They looked very excited, and many people followed them. Female assassins, and there were 2 of them. Could they be Lu Feng and her sister? Ling Han immediately changed his route, and also walked towards the eastern gate. How did these 2 women reveal their identity and whereabouts, and actually fall into the hands of the imperial family? He slightly quickened his pace, and in only a minute or 2, he arrived at the eastern gate. He saw that a high platform had been set up in a public square, and two women were currently pressed against the execution rack. Their hair was disheveled, and it was not clear what they looked like. However, with Ling Han's understanding of the two women's aura, he was certain that they were the Lu sisters. Were these two really made to be assassins? Someone at the side was loudly announcing the two women's crimes. They had attempted to assassinate an important official of the imperial court, Na Zhiyan, and had offended the authority of the heavens. They were to be executed as a warning to others. To execute these two beauties in front of everyone, and with such speed, it must have been because the Fire Emperor had forcefully excavated the mine, causing the people to be furious. Thus, he had intentionally executed these two women in such a high-profile manner to suppress the rebellious sentiment in the entire empire, especially in the imperial city. Assassinate Na Zhiyan? Tui. Those two girls must be good people. The heavens are blind. They actually didn't kill that damned Na Zhiyan. Instead, two good people died. Shu, lower your voice. Do you want to die? The crowd discussed fervently, expressing their sympathy for the Lu sisters, while hating Na Zhiyan to the bone. Ling Han did not immediately make a move to save them. He wanted the two women to learn from their mistakes and not become assassins in the future. They were not cut out for this. Bo Wenlin naturally followed along, and his face was filled with shock. This person who was about to die actually still had the mood to be executed. How thick did he have to be? The time has come. Execute. An executioner walked up the stage. He was bare-chested, and he held a huge machete in his hand. He drank a mouthful of wine, then sprayed it onto the blade of the machete. He raised it up high, and the body of the machete reflected a sorrowful color under the setting sun. The cultivation levels of the Lu sisters had obviously been sealed. To the majority of martial artists, once their cultivation levels were sealed, they would not be able to circulate their origin power to protect their bodies. As such, their defensive capabilities were actually not much higher than that of a normal person. This executioner was a poly-tier martial artist. With one chop of the machete, one of the sisters would definitely be beheaded. Shua, the machete chopped down. However, the scene of a severed head falling to the ground and blood splattering did not appear. Instead, a youth suddenly appeared on the stage, using one hand to stop the descending machete. Chapter 527. Thousand Worm, Ling Han frowned, revealing a strong expression of dread. Run, this big guy can't be fought with force. Why? Li Fengyu was indeed a blabbermouth, still maintaining a strong curiosity at this time. Your sister, run. Ling Han opened his large hand of origin power and grabbed everyone apart from Wenren Qian. He broke into a run, circling around and leaving this place. Wenren Qian naturally followed and ran. Even Ling Han and Jia Ming chose to run, so she wouldn't try to be brave. That long worm chased swiftly, its hundreds of legs striding in unison, surprisingly orderly. Its speed was also extremely fast, rapidly shortening the distance with Ling Han and the others. You too. Ling Han opened his large hand of origin power again and grabbed Wenren Qian, then used the thunderclap ninth heaven. Blazing white lightning flashed on his body, and his figure instantly accelerated, rapidly pulling apart the distance between him and the long worm. His current speed could rival heaven-tier warriors, and even if he brought along a few people, it was enough to reach the height of the deity transformation tier. In the end, that long worm finally gave up the chase and turned back, arriving at the place of ambush in the beginning. It entered a hole and quickly disappeared. Only then did Ling Han stop in his tracks, and put everyone down. Brother-in-law, why do we have to run? Li Fengyu still couldn't forget this question. Ling Han sighed, and said, Thousand Worm never exists alone, since one appeared, then there's another one. Li Fengyu followed up. Ling Han shook his head, and said, then there's another nest. Pooh, Li Fengyu spurted out, and said, there's actually another nest of such disgusting worms. Thousand Worm, a nest of at least 1,000, or else how could it have such a name? That one just now already had the strength of a middle-stage deity transformation tier, and this kind of demonic worm has extremely strong recovery ability, even harder to deal with than a high-stage deity transformation tier. If another nest is provoked, then it'll be fun, Ling Han said, shaking his head. Then let's go, let's go. The women's expressions were unsightly. They obviously hated this kind of thing the most. Even Hun Yo, for once, wasn't fond of fighting, mainly because that thing truly looked disgusting, making her unable to eat it. They bypassed the region, and then continued to chase after the sun. Ong! A beast's roar suddenly came from ahead, shocking the earth and making it tremble. Heaven tier, Ling Han said to the others after a moment's explanation. This place is truly dangerous, everyone said one after another. However, no one retreated. The more dangerous it was, the more astonishing the chance. Without the resolve to face death and come back alive, then what was the point of venturing out and taking risks? They'd just go home and spend their days mediocre. However, no one would deliberately throw away their lives, so they bypassed the place where the beast's roar came from. Previously, a shattering void tier elite entered here, and actually didn't slaughter these vicious creatures in passing, Li Fengyu mumbled. These vicious creatures sensed the presence of a shattering void tier elite, would they still dare to take a breather? Ling Han said with a smile. Just like how they could only take a detour when they discovered a heaven tier beast, these beasts could only tuck their tails when they discovered a shattering void tier elite. After another while, a strange grassland appeared in front of them. It was especially green, somewhat out of place with the surrounding environment. Li Fengyu was just about to walk forward, but Ling Han reached out and grabbed him, forcibly dragging him back. "Brother-in-law, why are you dragging me?" he asked, puzzled. Ling Han sighed, and said, "If you spout any more nonsense, I'll throw you over." Li Fengyu finally became vigilant and said, "Is this grassland abnormal? You try." Ling Han laughed loudly, and threw him out. "Help!" Li Fengyu hurriedly cried out, and hurriedly soared into the sky. At this moment, this even darker grassland also suddenly underwent a change. Strands of grass shrunk into the ground, and the earth trembled slightly. Pang! A large hand blasted out, grabbing towards Li Fengyu. "What the hell?" Li Fengyu exclaimed, and hurriedly turned his palm into a saber, slashing towards that large hand. Although he had a big mouth, his talent really wasn't weak, or else he wouldn't have been able to enter the Restore Heaven Academy. Attacking with full strength, martial intent spread out, and the saber chi blazed densely with vein-like patterns, extremely powerful. Pang, 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 but when these saber chi hit that large hand, it didn't cause the slightest bit of damage, and didn't even slow it down, continuing to grab towards Li Fengyu. Ling Han snorted, and used his fingers as a sword, slashing towards that large hand. Xiao, sword ray shocked the skies. That large hand didn't dare to let itself be hit, and instead clenched into a fist, meeting the sword ray head-on. Pang, martial intent collided, and sword ray shot out dazzlingly. Li Fengyu hurriedly ran back, shivering in fright. Hong, a colossus broke out of the earth. This was a giant that was 30 meters tall, and its back was covered in dark green grass. Obviously, this giant was lying on the ground earlier, and green grass grew on its body. "Damn rock man, you dare ambush me!" Li Fengyu shouted furiously, then turned around to look at Ling Han with a fawning expression. "Young Master Han, exterminate it." This was a rock man, and its aura was terrifying because it was a deity transformation tier existence. Ling Han laughed loudly, summoned the rock man, and said, "Big guy, this is your dish, get rid of it." When the rock spirit saw its own kind, it instantly let out a roar, but it wasn't a roar of joy, but a provocation. Creatures raised by the heavens and the earth like them, the process of growth was a war of mutually devouring each other, and definitely didn't have the pleasant surprise of seeing a fellow townsman. Ong! The large rock man also roared, but its roar was much more shocking than the small rock spirits. The roar formed a hurricane, blowing everyone's hair into a mess. The rock spirit instantly shriveled and shrunk behind Ling Han's back, whimpering like a frightened puppy. Earlier, it excitedly wanted to devour the other party, but when the other party showed its might, it suddenly discovered that the other party was much fiercer than it. Ling Han laughed loudly. The rock spirit was becoming more and more human-like. Did this guy still look like a rock spirit now? It was practically a puppy, wagging its tail and begging for pity, bullying the weak and fearing the strong. However, the Black Tower already condensed the first spirit stone, which was refined by the rock spirit. With 2 more, this big guy could advance into the spiritual infant tier. The large rock man stared at Ling Han, or to be precise, the rock spirit behind Ling Han was only blocked by Ling Han. It opened its mouth, and if it had saliva, it would definitely be dripping out by now. For it, the rock spirit was also a feast. It wouldn't say any nonsense, immediately pouncing towards Ling Han. In its eyes, Ling Han was only an ant, and it would crush over without hesitation, then devour the rock spirit, becoming the cornerstone for it to step onto a higher tier. The rock spirit obviously couldn't be this large rock man's opponent, so Ling Han attacked and took on this powerful opponent. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 528. Lord Bo, you're being naughty again, Ling Han said with a laugh. Xiao, Hunyo dashed out and threw a punch at Bo Wenlin's lower abdomen. Her battle prowess was astonishing, and she also had the advantage of 2 major tiers. Naturally, she was able to crush Bo Wenlin without any suspense. With a bang, Bo Wenlin was turned into a roasted lobster, his entire body curling up. Ling Han deliberately sighed, and said, Lord Bo, why do you have to do this? The supervisor's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. That was Bo Wenlin. His cultivation level was the same as his, and his strength was on par with his. In the Fire Nation, Bo Wenlin was an absolutely powerful figure, but he was actually knocked down by a single punch from a little girl. This was too ridiculous. If he went up, wouldn't he suffer the same fate? Hiss, where did these 2 monsters come from? Ling Han smiled at the supervisor and said, Are you obedient? Yes, I'm very obedient. The supervisor hurriedly said. Hunyo was glaring at him fiercely, making his hair stand on end. Ling Han laughed loudly, and kicked Bo Wenlin to the supervisor's feet and said, Here, you can take him back to complete your task. Make friends my ass. The prison officer was extremely furious at first, but after thinking about it carefully, how could there be any reason for old Ninth Bo to collude with a fugitive? Thus, he immediately believed Bo Wenlin's explanation. The other party had absolutely no relationship with Ling Han and the 2 female criminals. Bo Wenlin groaned. Hunyo's punch didn't take his life, but the little girl didn't hold back, hitting him so hard that his organs felt like they were flipped upside down, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. Now, he couldn't even speak and only wanted to vomit. Ling Han waved at Bo Wenlin and said, Lord Bo, aren't you going to follow me to the ends of the earth? Don't be afraid. He strode off. The supervisor didn't dare to stop him, and hurriedly picked up Bo Wenlin and followed behind like a follower, making him feel very sullen. After walking for a while, Bo Wenlin finally recovered and could walk on his own, but with every step, his lower abdomen still ached painfully. He pulled open his clothes, and saw that his lower abdomen was bruised, and the center was already black. Hiss, this girl is so ruthless. Where are they going this time? Na Jiyan's residence. Not good. The expressions on Bo Wenlin's and the warden's faces changed drastically. It was very easy to imagine that these 2 female criminals had been convicted for the assassination of Na Jiyan. Since Ling Han was in cahoots with them, it was very normal for him to harbor thoughts of assassinating Na Jiyan. Na Jiyan was the favorite of the current Fire Emperor, and his power and influence were unparalleled. If Ling Han were to kill Na Jiyan, the 2 of them, as people related to him, would definitely be implicated. Quickly go inform the other lords. The 2 of them exchanged a glance and hurriedly went their separate ways. Ling Han didn't walk very fast, as if he wanted to give them time to inform the others. He took his time, but he still arrived at the place after more than 20 minutes. Na Jiyan's residence originally belonged to an imperial prince, but this imperial prince was very restless, and plotted to seize power. In the end, he was suppressed before he could do anything, and this residence was naturally confiscated. Now, it was given to Na Zhiyan, and it was obvious how much the emperor favored him. Shua, a group of soldiers walked out from the main doors, all of them holding sabers, spears, axes, and battle axes, looking very murderous. A person who looked like the leader also walked out with large strides. He wore a silver helmet on his head, and there was a long sword hanging from his waist, making him look very majestic. This person was actually in the spiritual pedestal tier. The great commander of our inner imperial guards, Si Kongzhen. How dare you, knave! Surrender immediately, he shouted loudly. Ling Han's eyes swept over him, and he said with a smile, Lord Bo, didn't you say that everything has been arranged for me, and that I only need to enter the residence and kill Na Zhiyan? Why is this different from what we agreed on? Little thief, don't pretend to be crazy. Si Kongzhen looked at Ling Han coldly, not daring to act rashly. He had already received a report that the little girl by Ling Han's side had knocked Bo Wenlin down with a single punch. It was incomparably strange, and he had no choice but to be cautious. Ling Han smiled and said, I am here to have a chat with that Na Zhiyan. There is no need for such a grand spectacle. Go ask that Na Zhiyan to come out. If we can talk things through, then everyone can still happily drink wine tonight. You're just a nobody. Do you think you're fit to meet that lord? Si Kongzhen said coldly. Ling Han sighed and said, these words are too hurtful, I don't like to hear it. Hunyo, what do you say? Fight. Hunyo waved her little fist. We'll use force to subdue others. What a violent little girl. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, you all heard it. We will use force to subdue others. Since that Na Zhiyan is unwilling to come out, then we can only barge in and drag him out for a discussion. Seeing that Ling Han was about to step forward, Si Kongzhen immediately moved to block his way. He directly drew his sword and slashed at Ling Han. He was an elite of the spiritual pedestal tier, and his power was far from what Bo Wenlin and the prison officer could compare with. With a wave of his sword, not only did 4 flashes of sword chi shoot out, there were also flashes of flames dancing in the air, appearing extremely terrifying. Nyo's little iron fist. Hunyo rushed out, and pang, with a single punch, she sent Si Kongzhen flying. Pooh! Seeing this scene, everyone choked. That was Si Kongzhen, a super elite in the 7th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. In the whole of Fire Country, the number of people who were more powerful than him could be counted on 10 fingers. But now, he was actually sent flying with a single punch from a little girl. Who could believe this? Heavens, was this little girl a monster? What kind of cultivation level did she have to be able to do this? Moreover, this was only the little one. Ling Han had not even made a move yet. Pa, 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 pa applause rang out, and a white-robed man walked out from the manor. This man was tall and slender, and his appearance was so handsome that it was almost bewitching. His head full of black hair was like a spirit snake, actually moving without any wind. He looked at Ling Han, smiled, and said, it is a pleasure to have a friend come from afar. I am Na Zhiyan, how should I address this friend? There was a look of surprise in Ling Han's eyes. This Na Zhiyan was actually in the flower blossom tier. Strange, really strange. There was actually no true flower blossom tier cultivator in the 9 nations of the desolate north. The so-called flower blossom tier was only half a step into the flower blossom tier, and one could only enter this tier with the support of the power of the nation, transcending beyond mortals. However, how strong one's battle prowess was, and how much their lifespan had been increased, was a completely different matter. Aside from a domineering figure like the Rain Emperor, Ling Han really did not believe that there was a genius in the 9 nations of the desolate north that could take that step. But this Na Zhiyan in front of him was a genuine flower blossom tier cultivator, and definitely did not rely on the support of the power of the nation. With this kind of power, he actually came to the desolate north to become an important official? Ling Han immediately understood. Na Zhiyan had to be heading for that mine. Painstakingly plotting to incite the Fire Emperor to reopen that deadly ancient mine, he was naturally not doing it for the ores that would make people go crazy. Most likely, it was for the cursed tool that was sealed underneath. It was more refreshing to read on one's phone. Chapter 529. Na Zhiyan, I am really very curious what is buried beneath that mine that would make you, a flower blossom tier cultivator, to not hesitate to become a favorite official and offer advice to a spiritual pedestal tier cultivator, Ling Han said. Hiss. Instantly, everyone was shocked. Na Zhiyan was actually in the flower blossom tier. Impossible, right? Definitely impossible. These words came from the mouth of an 18 or 19-year-old youth, so how could they be convincing? Meanwhile, Na Zhiyan smiled, and said, a flower blossom tier cultivator at such a young age like you, this is the first time I've seen one. Not to say that there will never be another like you in the future, but at least you are unprecedented. This time, a great many people fell to the ground. Ling Han was also in the flower blossom tier. Weren't these two people flattering each other endlessly? How old was this youth? 20 at most. In the desolate north, people of this age would at most be in the gushing spring tier. Moreover, how difficult was it to cross the barrier of the flower blossom tier? Even if you were given 20 years, you might not be able to succeed, not to mention that this brat had only lived for such a long time. But Bo Wenlin felt a chill in his heart, because he remembered that he had once been stared at by Ling Han to the point that his whole body went limp. This kind of power was definitely terrifyingly strong. What if Ling Han really was in the flower blossom tier? Forget about avenging his son. This might even cause the entire Bo clan to lose. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, Sir, you are really surprised by your lack of experience. There may not be a flower blossom tier cultivator as young as me in this generation, but there might not be one in history. However, there is a gap in our history, and we are completely lacking in understanding of the events of 10,000 years ago. You are right, sir. Na Zhiyan nodded, then changed the topic and said, however, a flower blossom tier cultivator at such a young age like sir, I believe there is no second person in this world who can compare to you. No, he's looking down on you, Ling Han said to Hunyo with a smile. Hit. Hunyo's figure flashed, and she had already disappeared from everyone's sight. Xiao, she appeared in front of Na Zhiyan, and her small fist shot out. She never used any martial arts techniques. She only used her fists, claws, and teeth. These three skills were enough to travel the world. Na Zhiyan instantly gave a muffled humph. He had not expected Hunyo's speed to be so fast. No, he had never thought that such a little girl would actually be a martial artist. Moreover, he had sensed it the moment she made her move. No matter what, this power had to be at the level of the flower blossom tier. If he were to take this punch, he would probably not die, but his lower body would probably explode. It couldn't be helped. Hunyo was too short, so where would her punch land? Though Na Zhiyan's appearance was bewitchingly beautiful, he was definitely not an idiot. How could he possibly dare to allow Hunyo to hit that spot? He hurriedly stretched out his hand and formed an ice wall in front of him. On the surface of the ice, numerous ancient characters flickered. This kind of vein pattern is really rare. Ling Han found it strange. Vein lines were the embodiment of martial arts willpower. Although the majority of people's vein lines were not the same, they could always be traced back to the source. For example, in the vast lands, all cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques were derived from over 100 ancient techniques, and one could find a corresponding similarity between them. However, his opponent's vein-like patterns were extremely unfamiliar. They were definitely derived from a completely different ancient technique. Strange, this person's background was strange, and his intentions were also very strange. Pang, Hunyo's fist landed on the layer of ice. Ka. Cracks immediately appeared on the layer of ice, and then shattered into pieces. However, this also bought Na Zhiyan enough time to retreat. However, Hunyo continued to attack, forcing Na Zhiyan to retreat continuously. Layer after layer of ice walls appeared, and shattered piece by piece. One retreated in a hurry, while the other charged even faster. In the end, it was Hunyo who had the upper hand against Na Zhiyan, not giving him the slightest chance to retaliate. Hein! Na Zhiyan was finally angered. With a cold humph, the strange image of a rising tide appeared behind him. He suddenly opened his mouth, and Pu, a water arrow actually shot out from his mouth. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the water arrow was also covered with ancient characters. This was not a normal water arrow, but one that was filled with destructive power, enough to pose a threat to Flower Blossom tier elites. Hunyo's figure finally flashed, and then she turned around, dodging this attack. At the same time, this gave Na Zhiyan enough time to finally stabilize his footing and turn the tables for the first time. Na Zhiyan's face was filled with shock, and he said, "How could this be, such a young Flower Blossom tier?" A Flower Blossom tier elite that was not even 20 years old was already enough to shock him so much that his eyeballs almost fell out. What more when Hunyo only looked like she was 5 or 6 years old? Even if she had been able to cultivate since she was in her mother's womb, so what? The others almost fainted. The moment the two of them exchanged blows, the aura of the Flower Blossom tier was completely revealed, causing everyone to feel a sense of reverence from the bottom of their hearts. This was the Flower Blossom tier. In terms of life, they had already transcended mortality. Aside from king tiers of martial arts, this kind of aura was absolutely suppressive to others. This time, they had to believe it even if they did not want to. Whether it was Na Zhiyan, Ling Han, or even a little girl of 5 or 6 years old, they were all in the Flower Blossom tier. There was no justice, there was really no justice. When did Flower Blossom tier elites become so worthless? 3 of them suddenly appeared, and 2 of them were so young. Ling Han broke into a smile, and said, "Frog at the bottom of a well, now you know what it means by there's always someone stronger, right?" Hunyo bared her teeth at Na Zhiyan. She had not even used her strongest weapon yet. Na Zhiyan's shocked expression was still unsettled, and he asked, "Are you the disciples of the Heaven Sword sect, or the brilliant disciples of the Cloud Phoenix sect?" "Neither." Ling Han shook his head. "There's no need to guess our origins. I have only come to say one thing, and that is to immediately stop the excavation of the ancient mine. Forgive me for not being able to comply." Na Zhiyan similarly shook his head. "Young man, no matter which party you come from, you must not interfere in this matter. This is a warning, or else the only thing that awaits you is death." "Oh, so it's really that exciting?" Ling Han laughed loudly, "Then all the more reason for me to play." Na Zhiyan's expression was filled with displeasure, and he asked, "What do you think of my abilities?" "Not much. I can suppress you in 3 moves," Ling Han said casually. Na Zhiyan was almost angered to death. He forcefully suppressed his anger, and said, "Where I come from, there are at least 80,000 if not 100,000 people at my level. There are at least 10 or 20,000 people stronger than me." Hiss! The faces of those people from Fire Country twitched. What kind of terrifying force was this? Flower Blossom tier elites actually numbered in the hundreds of thousands. It had to be known that in the whole of Fire Country, only the old emperor from 2 generations ago had managed to advance into the Flower Blossom tier by relying on power of the nation. Moreover, the power of the nation could only nurture one Flower Blossom tier elite. Moreover, there were people stronger than the Flower Blossom tier, as many as 10 to 20,000. Too terrifying. What kind of power was that? Ling Han nodded and said, "Then I'm really curious, where are you from?" "Humph, this has nothing to do with you. You only need to know that if you become my enemy, you will die without a proper burial," Na Zhiyan said coldly. "Nyo, do you think we've grown up scared?" Ling Han suddenly asked Hunyo. "No," Hunyo said crisply. "What if someone threatens us?" Ling Han asked again. "Beat him until he submits, and use violence to subdue him," Hunyo said in a very violent manner. Chapter 530. Ling Han turned to Na Zhiyan, smiled, and said, "Our slogan is to subdue others with violence. If you are not convinced, we will beat you until you are convinced." Na Zhiyan's expression became even colder, and he said, "Young man, do not be rash." "How about this?" He had not even finished his sentence when Ling Han had already charged over. Leaping high into the air, he aimed a kick at Na Zhiyan's face. As the saying went, do not hit a person's face in a fight. Not only did Ling Han want to hit his face, he even used his foot to kick him. This was really looking down on him too much. "Junior, you are too arrogant," Na Zhiyan said angrily. He raised his hand to block Ling Han's attack. Hong, 7 icicles spread out, and cold air filled the air. In an instant, the temperature dropped by several dozen degrees, and shards of ice continuously formed in the air and fell down. There were ancient patterns on the icicles that moved, forming one character after another, as if the 7 icicles had all become divine weapons. Na Zhiyan smirked coldly. "Unless you are an expert in leg techniques, if you use your weakness to attack your opponent's strength, then you will suffer greatly." Pang! This kick landed, and the icicles instantly shattered, turning into shards of ice that danced in the air. Meanwhile, Ling Han's foot was not affected in the slightest, and continued to kick fiercely at Na Zhiyan's face. How could this be? Though Na Zhiyan did not cry out in shock, his face showed such an expression. He was too shocked. Just how much of a gap was there between the two of them for such a one-sided result to appear? Pang! In the nick of time, Ling Han's foot landed fiercely, landing squarely on Na Zhiyan's face. Under the powerful impact, Na Zhiyan instantly fell to the ground. His entire head was stomped into the green stone path, as if he was a headless monster. Hiss, this was too tragic. A mighty flower blossom tier cultivator was actually abused like this. Pang! Crushed stones flew everywhere. Na Zhiyan shot up, his face ashen. In this tiny little desolate north, he actually suffered such humiliation, practically giving him the urge to commit suicide. Thankfully, the people from his own party had not arrived, or else he would really be too ashamed to face anyone. Xiao, Pang! Just as he said one word, he was immediately kicked away by Ling Han, and his head was once again buried into the bluestone road. Sympathy flashed across everyone's faces. Flower blossom tier elites were high above in everyone's hearts, as if they were gods, but now they were in such a miserable state, repeatedly having their heads stepped on by others. They really didn't know what to say. Na Zhiyan broke through the ground a second time, but like before, he only managed to say one sentence before he was stomped back into the ground by Ling Han's foot. 3 times, 5 times, 10 times. After the 10th time, Na Zhiyan finally understood that he was completely not a match for Ling Han. Hence, it was better for him to be more obedient. Not only did he not break out of the ground, but he also did not make a sound. He looked like a scoundrel who wanted to bite him if he wanted to be an ostrich. Being a flower blossom tier elite to this extent, what a disgrace. But everyone knew that it was because Ling Han was too powerful. In terms of battle prowess, he completely suppressed Na Zhiyan. What could Na Zhiyan do? Fun! Hunyo clapped at the side, then swept a threatening glance over the crowd, and said discontentedly, "Why didn't Nyo hear any applause?" Pa, 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 pa. Everyone hurriedly clapped. This little girl was not someone they could afford to offend. Ling Han smiled slightly, squatted on the ground, and said, "Then, milord, can we talk peacefully now?" Na Zhiyan wanted to cry, but had no tears. He had always wanted to resolve this peacefully, but you were so fuck you violent, first letting a little girl go on top, and then himself, going on top so many times. But faced with these two violent people, how could he dare to protest? He hurriedly slapped the ground, expressing his agreement to talk peacefully. Then talk properly. Don't bury your head so low, I will mistakenly think that you have something against me. Oh, right, you wouldn't have something against me, right? Ling Han asked with a smile. Na Zhiyan pulled his head out, hurriedly shook his head, and said, I wouldn't dare, I wouldn't dare. Wouldn't dare or wouldn't dare? Ling Han asked, smiling. Wouldn't dare, and wouldn't dare. Na Zhiyan was smart this time. Ling Han patted his shoulder and said, "This is a very good start, and I am very satisfied. You'd better let me continue to be satisfied. Otherwise, if I am not satisfied, you will feel terrible." I understand, I understand. Na Zhiyan hurriedly nodded. Tell me about your background first. Ling Han was very curious. Na Zhiyan's martial art inheritance seemed to be very different from the orthodoxies of the world. Na Zhiyan hesitated. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Actually, I can still search your soul." Na Zhiyan's face instantly turned green. If his soul was searched, then his soul would disappear, and he would be as dead could be. Searching one's soul was definitely not a technique that a flower blossom tear cultivator could use, but the problem was, which flower blossom tear cultivator would be as young as Ling Han and Hunyo? Thus, he would rather believe it. I come from the sea race, he hurriedly said. Sea race. Ling Han was surprised. In both his last life and this life, he had never heard of the sea race, so where did this force come from? Wait, outside the desolate north was the sea, and the sea race was a race that lived in the sea? Na Zhiyan nodded, and without waiting for Ling Han to ask, he began to explain, actually, most of the regions of the world are the sea. I come from the North Sea, and there are also the East Sea, the West Sea, the South Sea, and the Central Sea. No wonder Na Zhiyan had said that there were 100,000 flower blossom tear cultivators there, and 10 to 20,000 stronger than flower blossom tear cultivators. The 100,000 flower blossom tear cultivators you speak of, do you mean the entire sea, or only your North Sea? Ling Han asked. We are from the North Sea, Na Zhiyan answered honestly. Ling Han's expression changed slightly. Though he had not been to the Middle State and the other 3 regions, he roughly estimated that there were only 100,000 flower blossom tear cultivators in 1 state and 4 regions of the world, and the North region had the least, perhaps not even 10,000. But just the North Sea alone had 100,000 flower blossom tear cultivators. If the power of the 5 sea regions was equal, then how powerful would the sea race be? Among your sea race, which sea region is the strongest? He asked. Naturally the Central Sea. That is the place where the Sea Emperor stands guard, a place that all the sea race yearns to go to, Na Zhiyan said, filled with longing. Tell me more specifically about the level of your North Sea's martial art, Ling Han continued to ask. Since Na Zhiyan had already spoken, he had no intention of hiding anything. He said, our North Sea is naturally led by the North Sea royal clan, and beneath them are many general clans. Seeing Ling Han glare at him, he hurriedly added, the general clan has at least an elite of the deity transformation tier standing guard, while the royal clan has at least an elite of the heaven tier. It is said that a few kings have even advanced into the shattering void tier, and are the strongest beings in the world. Shattering void tier. Ling Han could not help but feel rueful. How important it was to be born in a good era. In his last life, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was sparse, and the environment for martial art was harsh. Even freaks like the Sword Emperor could only be trapped in the heaven tier. And with his talent in alchemy, if it was in the current era, he could definitely use alchemy to advance into the shattering void tier, or even become a god. The current him definitely did not have the right to stand against an elite of the shattering void tier. Chapter 531. Peng, the earth split open, and a gigantic demonic beast drilled out. It was shaped like a lion, 30 meters long and 15 meters tall, and its whole body was covered with black scales, making it look like a pangolin. However, its tail was completely different. It was long, and the tip was like a corn cob. It exuded a faint fragrance, like an exceptional precious medicine. And what was familiar to everyone was that why did that tail look so much like that spiritual medicine? Ling Han's expression changed drastically. Previously, that wasn't a precious medicine at all, but rather a bait that this demonic beast had released. It deliberately let its tail change slowly, like a precious medicine that was slowly maturing. Its purpose was to gather the largest number of prey, so that it could catch them all in one go. This could also explain why those shattering void tier elites didn't pay attention to this precious medicine when they passed by earlier, because they didn't notice it at all. This was a powerful existence of the shattering void tier, and here, it was invincible. The 7 great heaven tier elites all stopped fighting, and when they saw this scene, they naturally reacted. However, being targeted by a shattering void tier elite and turned into prey, how could they escape? Ong! This demonic beast let out a loud roar. Hong, the sound waves were like a tsunami. Pang, 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 everything within a radius of a few miles nearby was shattered. The 7 great heaven tier elites were obviously the first to bear the brunt. All of them were shaken to the point that their skin broke and their bones cracked, and they barely had a breath left. Fortunately, it was precisely because the 7 great heaven tier elites started fighting that the others retreated far away to avoid the brunt of the attack, so they were spared from this disaster. Even so, everyone's arms were either severed or legs were severed, just that they weren't shaken into pieces. The might of the shattering void tier was incomparably powerful, and a single attack could slash down stars. Fortunately, Ling Han and the others retreated even further, and were practically unaffected. However, they were still pressured by the shattering void tier's aura to the point that their faces turned pale, and even breathing was difficult. Everyone's expression changed. How could they block this? A shattering void tier demonic beast targeted them, and wanted to treat them as prey. Run! Everyone almost instantly scattered and fled in all directions. That demonic beast also moved. It first inhaled, and swallowed all 7 heaven tier elites into its mouth. With a few crunching sounds, it swallowed them into its stomach, and then began a massacre. Although everyone fled in all directions, how fast was the shattering void tier's speed? When it finished eating all the prey in the east, south, and west directions, the furthest those who fled towards the north had only escaped over 100 miles. This was obviously Ling Han and his party. The Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing were also among them, and there were also super geniuses like Yao Huiyu and Jia Ming. They all coincidentally chose the path they had come from, because if they fled in this direction, it was the most likely that they would encounter reinforcements. Ling Han sighed inwardly. Wanting to compete in speed with shattering void tier elites was a dream. Perhaps he could only use the Black Tower to save those he cared about. At most, he would temporarily not let some people out. The gold-seeking rat was so scared that it pretended to be dead again. It laid down, its tail standing straight, but Hunyo grabbed it and said with a smile, "The large rat is dead, so let's eat it, okay?" Once these words were spoken, the gold-seeking rat naturally became lively again, squeaking strangely, meaning why did this little girl always want to eat babies? The rabbit felt the same way, and said as it ran, "Now you also know Uncle Rabbit's hardships, right?" "Less nonsense, hurry and run for your life," Ling Han said. What kind of buffoons were by his side? Even in such a situation, they still didn't act properly. This was obviously also because the rabbit and Hunyo's speed was too fast. Although they couldn't be faster than a shattering void tier elite, in this kind of fleeing situation, you only needed to run faster than others, and at least be guaranteed to survive to the end. Jejij, such a mighty demonic lion, just right to be this king's mount. At this moment, a delicate laughter was heard, and a woman dressed in a long purple dress suddenly appeared. No one knew how she appeared, as if she was born here. This woman was as beautiful as a peach. She stood in the sky, a light breeze blowing her long dress, and her bare feet were like jade, adding a bit of elegance to her. What was shocking was that there were multiple divine rays dancing around her, as if a goddess had descended to the mortal world. Ong! That demonic beast abruptly stopped and stared at this woman full of vigilance, flames spewing from its nostrils as if it was filled with fear towards her. Being able to make a shattering void tier demonic beast feel fear, needless to say, this woman was definitely also a shattering void tier existence. People like Yao Huiyu and Jia Ming were both proud disciples of the 5 great sects, so they'd naturally seen their own sects, as well as other sects shattering void tier elites, but none of them matched up to this woman in front of them. It was really strange. This was a shattering void tier elite and definitely couldn't appear out of thin air. Ling Han, however, breathed a sigh of relief. This woman was the Lunar King. Little kitty, be obedient and be this king's mount. The Lunar King made her move and attacked that demonic lion. Their great battle shook everyone to the point of hurriedly fleeing. If they were directly hit by the aftermath of each attack, it would be enough to kill them 100 times. In the distance, there was a team of 100 people quickly approaching. Like an army, their formation was so orderly that it made one speechless. 10 people in a row, forming a neat and tidy square formation. Everyone's expression was solemn, and they held a long spear in their hands, emitting an iron-blooded aura. Everyone's cultivation was in the deity transformation tier, which was very shocking. Deity transformation tier warriors could be called elites no matter where they were, but this team of 100 people seemed to be someone's personal army. In the front row, there was even someone carrying a battle flag that had a slender white hand holding up a crescent moon. They stopped in front of the battle group, far closer than Ling Han and the others to the battle range of the Lunar King and the demonic lion. When the battle waves swept over, they all struck with their spears, and the power of 100 people could actually miraculously fuse together, possessing the battle prowess of the heaven tier, completely dispelling the aftermath. Everyone was dumbfounded. 100 deity transformation tier warriors could compare to heaven tier warriors. This was like a dream. Ling Han, however, understood in his heart that this should be the Lunar King's personal army. Only the Purple Moon Empire, a powerful force that was buried who knew how many years ago, could master this kind of miraculous formation, gathering the power of everyone as one. The Lunar King was really too powerful. Her slender white hands were comparable to divine materials, and with a slap, the demonic lion was continuously flipped over. No matter what kind of terrifying attack the demonic lion launched, she very casually received it, appearing relaxed and happy. On her body, Ling Han sensed an aura similar to that of the Sword King and Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. She was definitely powerful, a king among kings. In less than the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the demonic lion was captured by the Lunar King. It lay on the ground with its tongue hanging out, struggling with all its might to get up, but was completely helpless. The Lunar King half reclined and half sat on the demonic lion's back in a graceful yet sexy posture. She waved at Ling Han and said, "Little handsome brother, come and massage this king's legs." She stretched out her perfectly straight long legs, and under her long skirt was actually a snow-white and smooth thigh, stirring one's heart and soul. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 532. The formation was ever-changing, and some of them focused on confusion, trapping people to death. Some were killing arrays, and once one entered the array, one would encounter endless killing intent. On the other hand, there were some formations that focused on defense, like an iron bucket. Great mountain protection arrays usually focused on defense, and this one in the Fire Country's Imperial Palace was exactly like that. Although it was a level 6 array, it would be very difficult for even a spiritual infant tier cultivator to forcibly break through. That was because once a gap was opened, it would very quickly close up. Unless one's power was strong enough to blast open a huge gap, only then would one be able to pass through easily. That would require at least the power of the middle stage of the spiritual infant tier. Ling Han's battle prowess was very awesome, but he was still unable to break through the limits of the spiritual infant tier. Thus, he could not possibly barge into this great formation by force, but this was a completely different matter from deciphering the formation. With the eye of truth, this formation had no secrets to speak of in front of him. The simplest way to break it is to destroy a few of the formation eyes inside. However, the formation eyes are in the formation, so this is contradictory, unless someone cooperates from the inside. However, there is a slightly more troublesome way to crack it, and that is to attack a few weak points at the same time to create a temporary gap. Ling Han murmured as the phenomena of the sun, moon, and stars surged in his eyes. I'll use the annihilating dragon star arrow to attack those 7 points at the same time. I believe I'll be able to open up a huge gap. He took a deep breath, opened his hands, and made a bow. Suddenly, 7 spots of light appeared and turned into 7 arrowheads. Then, the arrowheads, which were intertwined with white light, also appeared. They were densely burning with characters, which also did not belong to the current cultivation system. They emitted an ancient and terrifying aura. The combination of the Eye of Truth and the annihilating dragon star arrow was simply a perfect match. Inexplicably, everyone in the palace felt an endless chill, as if they would suffer a terrible mishap in the next second. Xiao, Ling Han released the 5 fingers of his right hand, and 7 light arrows immediately shot toward the formation. As soon as they were shot, the 7 light arrows flew in 7 different directions. They were so fast that no one could catch the trajectory of the light arrows. This kind of speed was simply killing whoever it hit, because under normal circumstances, who would constantly use their elemental energy to protect themselves. Wang, wang, wang. The arrow arrived, but it did not directly hit the imperial palace. A curtain suddenly appeared in the sky, blocking the arrow. However, this curtain of light seemed to be made of porcelain. Countless cracks appeared on it, and it suddenly shattered. Ling Han revealed a sliver of a smile. Under his Eye of Truth, this great formation immediately became so weak that it could not withstand a single blow, and was directly destroyed by his 7 arrows. Of course, this was also because of the power of the annihilating dragon star arrow. Otherwise, even if they found the flaw, they might not be able to break through it. After all, this flaw was only a relatively weak point. It was not something that could be blasted apart by any attack. However, the eye of the formation was not destroyed. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged in and began to rebuild the formation. Let's go. Ling Han did not have the time to practice his archery here, and immediately brought Hunyo with him into the imperial city. At this time, even if the formation was activated again, it would be useless. Ling Han had already entered into the formation, and if he wanted to break the formation, it would be countless times easier. He just had to destroy the formation's eye. What? He actually broke through the formation and entered. Impossible, even spiritual infant-tier warriors might not be able to break through this formation. Everyone cried out in shock. This was truly unbelievable. Ling Han was only in the flower blossom tier, so how could he instantly break through the imperial city's defensive formation? Could it be that this guy's battle prowess was even more terrifying than spiritual infant-tier warriors? What could they do? Even the protective formation was helpless, so who could stop Ling Han? Little friend, if you have anything to say, just say it to this old man. I believe no matter how big the matter, this old man can make the decision. At this time, an old man appeared. He looked to be in his 70s or 80s, so old that he looked like he could close his eyes at any time. There was actually a flame burning on top of his head. This was not a real flame, but the fire of martial art. What did the appearance of the fire of martial art mean? Forcibly boosting one's vitality, burning one's life and the will of martial art as the price, allowing oneself to reach the best state in the later stages of one's life. This was something that could not be helped. When martial artists entered old age, their blood and chi would weaken, and their battle prowess would not be what it was in the past. Only by burning the fire of martial art could one battle to the extreme. However, in this way, regardless of victory or defeat, one's vitality would be greatly damaged, and the originally little remaining lifespan would fall even further. It was possible that one would directly die after the battle. Old Emperor. Everyone knelt down, extremely reverent. This was the Emperor of Fire Country 2 generations ago, and also the only Flower Blossom tier warrior of Fire Country. He was forcibly raised by power of the nation, and only in Fire Country did he possess the lifespan of a Flower Blossom tier warrior. Otherwise, once he left, with his close to 300 years of life, he would definitely immediately decay. In the desolate north, Flower Blossom tier warriors were the divine tools that guarded the country and defended against foreign invaders. Ling Han was too powerful, breaking through the formation with one move, forcing the old emperor to show himself. This was indeed the most dangerous time for Fire Country. I only have one request, and that is to stop excavating that ancient mine forever, Ling Han said. The old emperor revealed a hesitant expression. That ancient mine could give spiritual pedestal-tier warriors the hope of breaking through, the real hope of breaking through. What did this mean? Fire Country would have more than one flower blossom-tier warrior, then, Fire Country could possibly sweep over the other 8 countries and unify the desolate north. More territory and more population would bring about a stronger power of the nation. Then, Fire Country would also be able to produce more powerful flower blossom-tier elites. Even if the ancient mine was emptied, the power of the nation wouldn't be emptied, and the foundation of Fire Country would be passed down through the ages. This was too important, so the old emperor was naturally hesitant. All right, this old man agrees. Only an instant later, the old emperor nodded in agreement. If he couldn't even pass this hurdle before him, how could he talk about the future? Ling Han said indifferently, I hope you're not doing it half-heartedly, or else. He drew out the demon birth sword, and with a slash, 19 flashes of sword chi shot out. Each flash of sword chi was filled with ancient characters. This was the bone pattern he obtained from the old vicious mongoose, which could increase one's attack power, and could practically be considered a mystical power. He slashed towards the sky, and a terrifying scene appeared. It was as if the sky was being torn apart, and a black void actually appeared. It was too terrifying. The might of this strike was so strong that it was impossible to fathom. Everyone trembled. 19 flashes of sword chi, was this guy really human? 10 flashes of chi made him a top-notch king tier, so what kind of concept was 19 flashes? In the flower blossom tier, he was definitely invincible. This time, the old emperor completely dispelled his naive idea of pretending to agree to Ling Han's request, stalling for time, and waiting for 8 or 10 flower blossom tier warriors to appear in the future to fight against Ling Han. Not to mention 8 or 10, even 80 or 100 would be a gift. I wouldn't dare. He lowered his stance to an extremely low level. Ling Han nodded, turned around, and left. He wanted to properly interrogate Na Jiyan. Chapter 533. When Ling Han arrived at the city gates, he entered the Black Tower with Hun Yo and began to interrogate Na Jiyan again. He wanted to know more about the sea race. Inside the Black Tower, Na Jiyan naturally had even less of a chance to resist. Whatever Ling Han asked, he would answer honestly, not daring to hide anything in the slightest. The general that Na Jiyan obeyed was called Xian Kongyun, and the Xian clan was also an extremely powerful existence among the general clans of the North Sea. This Xian Kongyun was an important member of the Xian clan, and was in the deity transformation tier. According to the information that Na Jiyan had privately gathered, this Xian Kongyun was very ambitious. Why did Xian Kongyun not send anyone else, but only Na Jiyan? Firstly, Na Jiyan had a special ability. Sea beasts were naturally good at bewitching, and could subdue their enemies without even fighting. In fact, they could even bewitch their enemies without them realizing it. For example, the Fire Emperor should know the consequences of forcefully opening the ancient mine. It could possibly shake the foundation of a nation, and ruin the power of the nation. However, he still stubbornly persisted, dreaming of breaking through to the flower blossom tier. On one hand, this was indeed a great temptation, and on the other hand, it had a great deal to do with Na Jiyan's bewitchment. Secondly, Xian Kongyun obviously did not want to alarm others, even the members of the Xian clan. Regarding the ancient mine and the mysterious curse tool, he should have learned about it from some ancient text, and wanted to keep it for himself. This could be ascertained from the fact that he only sent Na Jiyan. Even if it was just one person, it would be relatively easy for him to silence them. Ling Han was even more curious. A treasure that could cause an elite of the deity transformation tier to spend so much effort to obtain it had to be shockingly valuable. He could be sure that the bottle was definitely the cursed tool that Small Tower spoke of, but what was its use? It was simple. He would know once he dug it out. Ling Han's fate was extremely tough, and added with the existence of the Black Tower, he did not need to worry about the problem of being cursed, and could completely do as he pleased in the ancient mine. Furthermore, he still had one more thing to do, and that was to bring the miners into the Black Tower to wash away the power of the curse. He arrived at the ancient mine, and by then, Imperial guards had already arrived, bringing with them the orders of the Fire Emperor. From this day onwards, the ancient mine would be immediately closed, and everything would be left to Ling Han's arrangements. Ling Han had all the miners gather in the upper area. Then, he unleashed the aura of the flower blossom tear to knock them out, and then drew them into the Black Tower. When he had drawn everyone into the Black Tower, he left the ancient mine and tossed them out. As for when they would wake up and how they would react, Ling Han could not be bothered. "Young Master Han, you really can't make an enemy of Lord Kong Yun." Na Jiyen was on the verge of tears. "I have to report the progress to Lord Kong Yun every 10 days, and tomorrow is the day to report. Lord Kong Yun is already rather dissatisfied with the current progress. If we continue to delay, it is hard to guarantee that Lord Kong Yun will not come personally. At that time, we will be in deep trouble. An elite of the deity transformation tier could kill a spiritual infant tier cultivator with a single thought. No matter how freakish Ling Han was, he couldn't possibly stand against them. So fast?" Ling Han frowned. If a deity transformation tier elite really came, how could he resist for so many days? The two immortal corpses had already lost too much of their immortal level pressure. Now, they would probably only be able to suppress flower blossom tier cultivators, which was meaningless to him. Did he still need help to deal with flower blossom tier cultivators? "Young Master Han, for the sake of our lives, don't bother with this matter." "You can't, anyway," Na Jiyen advised. Moreover, he had a guess. Even Xian Kongyun, who was in the deity transformation tier, was so heavy, so the effect of that bottle was definitely above the deity transformation tier. That would naturally be terrible. If the news really leaked out, perhaps even the royal family would make a move. Ling Han shook his head. This ancient mine definitely couldn't be excavated anymore, and the threat of a deity transformation tier cultivator couldn't be ignored. How about this? He could get his hands on that cursed tool, and let that deity transformation tier cultivator chase after him. In any case, he was going to the middle state. The boundaries were a natural barrier, and a deity transformation tier cultivator's power would be greatly weakened if he went there. Moreover, in the middle state, deity transformation tier cultivators really couldn't be considered a very powerful existence. It was decided then. Ling Han was going to activate that cursed tool in the first place, and now he was naturally even more anxious. He returned to the ancient mine, and went deep into the depths, searching together with Hunyo. The ancient mine was a very special place. Cursed chi that was like threads of blood rose up, preventing divine sense from spreading out, causing Ling Han to be unable to detect things that were too far away. However, because he knew that it was very likely that the bottle was the source of the cursed chi, Ling Han also had a solution, and that was to head towards the place where the cursed chi was the strongest. When he found the place, he would continue to dig downwards. In terms of digging, he was definitely more efficient than 10,000 miners put together. What kind of power did flower blossom tier cultivators have? Regardless of whether it was rock or soil underneath, they would all be broken open. Furthermore, there was no need to waste any effort to move the soil that was dug out. Instead, they could all be tossed into the Black Tower. The space inside was ridiculously large, and who knew how many mountains, rivers, and seas could be stored in it. The effect was naturally astonishingly high. After only a little less than half a day, the chi that rose up from below was as red as blood. With just a touch, their skin turned blood red, and a strong violent impulse arose in their hearts, wanting to kill all living things. This had a great effect. In just a short while, both Ling Han and Hunyo felt the pressure, and hurriedly entered the Black Tower to take a breather. This isn't the power of a curse, but a great elite might have died here. He had a violent nature, and has been affecting this place for a long time, Small Tower said. Ling Han frowned, and said, "What you mean is that there is not only a cursed tool here, but also the corpse of a great elite might be buried here." Perhaps that person was killed by the cursed tool, Small Tower speculated. After staying in the Black Tower for a long time, the terrifying violent impulse in their bodies finally disappeared. The two of them once again exited the Black Tower, and continued to dig downwards. Hunyo was obviously an expert, and her little claws were extremely sharp. Such strong resentment. After digging for another 10 minutes or so, Ling Han was suddenly shocked, feeling as if something had drilled into his body. It was strange, and made him feel an indescribable threat. Was this the power of a curse? It wouldn't immediately take someone's life, but it would imperceptibly affect them, and finally cause them to die suddenly. A bottle. Hunyo said, pointing at the ground. Ling Han nodded, and a bottle's mouth was revealed there. He hurriedly continued to dig, and soon, this bottle was completely revealed. It was only a foot tall, very slender, and made of jade. Even if it had been buried in the ground for many years, it wouldn't be damaged in the slightest. There were many patterns on the bottle's body, which should be some kind of martial art intent, in the direction of a curse. He wanted to pick up the jade bottle, but when he tried, he actually couldn't pick it up. It's grown roots. He exerted a bit more force, and the jade bottle was finally picked up. However, a blood-colored fountain also gushed out, and an incredibly terrifying aura spread out. Even if Ling Han had the divine sense of the heaven tier, he still trembled as if a great calamity was about to befall him. Let's go. He put away the jade bottle, hurriedly grabbed Hunyo, and flew upwards. Chapter 534. Hong, the blood-colored fountain grew fiercer and fiercer. At first, it was only a fountain pillar as thick as an arm, but it soon became as thick as a person and as thick as a well. Finally, it seemed to become a heavenly spring, the blood waves surging as if to drown the whole world. Ling Han flew upwards with all his might. Below him, the water level was rising rapidly, almost catching up to his feet. Under the terrifying corrosive power, his shoes began to disintegrate, then his socks, and his feet also became extremely itchy. Layers of skin fell off as if his flesh and blood were about to melt, leaving only a skeleton. This was too terrifying. It was just some mist that evaporated, and the corrosive power had reached such a degree. If he was swallowed by the blood waves, could he still survive? One had to know that he cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, and his body was like precious metal of the same level. If it was another flower blossom tier cultivator, he would probably have turned into a pool of blood by now. Ling Han hurriedly stored Hunyo into the Black Tower, and desperately flew upwards. Could it be that this place was originally a great formation, and the jade bottle was the eye of the formation, the core? Now that he took away the eye of the formation, the great formation stopped operating, and the thing suppressed inside immediately ran out. Then didn't he cause a great disaster? Thankfully, everyone here was moved away, or else the original miners here would have been drowned by the blood sea. Peng, Ling Han soared into the sky, and he was already above the ancient mine. A pillar of blood soared into the sky, reaching at least 30 meters high before it began to fall. A large amount of blood surged, and in an instant, the entire ancient mine became a lake. As far as the eye could see, it was a field of blood red. Ling Han stood at the side of the lake and held his breath. This bloody water carried a strong fishy smell, as if it had just experienced a massacre. This smell was especially stimulating, making him feel as if he was about to transform into a demon, desiring to slaughter the entire world. Was this really a pool of blood? If it was, then how many people had died? Ling Han couldn't help but feel numb. He was very clear about how huge the ancient mine was, but he didn't know how big the space sealed under the jade bottle was. But just to fill the area of the ancient mine, the blood of 10 million people wasn't enough. You guessed wrong. At most, there is only the blood of a dozen or so people here, Small Tower suddenly said. How is this possible? Ling Han immediately cried out. If there were only a dozen people, then how big would they be? Would they be as big as a mountain? The higher a martial artist's strength is, the more blood and chi they will have. A little bit of blood can turn into an ocean. What's so strange about that? Small Tower countered. This blood only comes from a dozen or so different sources, and at most, it comes from a dozen or so people. Ling Han wanted to say something, but he was startled. He saw a white light in the middle of the blood lake. Following that, a white corpse floated up to the surface of the lake. It was a man, and he was definitely handsome when he was alive. At this moment, he was dressed in white, and there was a wound on his chest. His heart had directly exploded. Another corpse appeared. It was a bald man wearing earthy yellow clothes. There were 9 holes on his head, and a string of beads hung in front of his chest. He was dressed very strangely. He was also the same. There was a hole in his chest, and his heart had been exploded. Is this the legendary ancient monk? Ling Han had heard of the ancient monk's attire before. They forbade meat and slaughter, and had strict rules and precepts. The third corpse appeared. This was an incredibly beautiful woman wearing a long red dress. In this place, the long dress and the blood were one, and it was impossible to tell the difference between the dress and the blood. It was not that her heart had been exploded, but rather that there was a bloody hole on her jade-white forehead, which had caused her to die. She was truly an enchanting beauty. Anyone who saw her would sigh in pity. Then, there was the fourth corpse. Ling Han counted. There were a total of 12 corpses. They seemed to have been suppressed underground before, and now they were released all at once. Ling Han had a deep understanding of how terrifying the corrosiveness of this blood was, but these corpses had actually not been corroded even after being buried for thousands or tens of thousands of years. Instead, they looked as if they had been alive. Just what cultivation level had they been at back then? Were heaven tier elites this strong? Ling Han was uncertain. He now only had a sliver of divine sense of the heaven tier, and could only make guesses about existences of the same cultivation level back then, and was unable to obtain an accurate answer. Perhaps these people were even existences of the shattering void tier. The problem was, although these people died from being struck in different vital spots, there was one similarity, and that was that they were all killed by someone's fist. Being punched in the heart, and being punched in the head, it was as if they were facing a supreme god, and could only be killed in an instant. The blood of the 12 peerless experts turned into a lake of blood. What? Ling Han revealed a look of shock. A mountain-like silver spider actually appeared on the surface of the lake. Each of its feet was like a heavenly spear, and the aura it emitted was extremely terrifying, making him feel as if he was made of porcelain, and now, under the impact, multiple cracks appeared. This was not an illusion. Ling Han lowered his head, and felt that cracks had already appeared on his hands, and beads of blood were gushing out. Moreover, there were more and more of them, forming a straight line that continuously fell down. Too terrifying. Just standing there from afar, it made him almost collapse. Heaven tier elites couldn't reach such a level, and this heaven and earth only allowed the extreme power of the shattering void tier, so this silver spider had to be a shattering void tier existence. This large silver spider only glanced at Ling Han, but there was no color in its eyes at all. It was high and mighty, like an invincible creature. It indeed didn't need to look down on Ling Han, because the two of them weren't on the same level at all. Just like when Ling Han met a normal person, did he need to show his superiority by looking down on the latter? With just this one glance, Ling Han discovered that his body was about to explode, and his soul was similarly about to explode. Perhaps, Ling Han had to return to the heaven tier to be able to resist such an aura, but it was merely an aura. Hong, just at this moment, a huge whirlpool suddenly appeared in the lake of blood, and the water level immediately began to drop at a rapid pace. In just a few breaths' time, the blood-colored lake water had completely disappeared, and those 12 corpses naturally disappeared along with it. The large silver spider moved its 8 giant legs, and its figure rapidly shrank, turning into a streak of light. With a xiao, it leaped into the mine, and was no longer seen. This ancient mine, what exactly was going on? Ling Han frowned deeply. In the beginning, he only thought that there was a cursed tool buried underneath, or a great elite that affected this land. However, He had obtained a cursed tool, yet 12 incomparably powerful corpses from when they were alive had appeared, and there was even a large silver spider that he suspected was still alive. He couldn't even be sure that it was only a phantom image from millions and millions of years ago, or if it really existed. It was so strong that it couldn't be approached at all, so it was naturally impossible to fathom. Chapter 535. Everyone joined forces to battle the tentacle monster. Ling Han was obviously the main force. Aside from him, no one else could withstand this beast's whip. After he blocked the tentacle monster's attack, Hun Yo and the others took the opportunity to show their might, slashing at this beast to collect its flesh and blood. However, this monster's defense was astonishing, and sabers and swords were completely useless against it. It was extremely slippery, as if it was covered in a layer of oil. Moreover, it was extremely elastic and similarly had the effect of neutralizing power. There were only two people that could pose a threat to it, Ling Han and Hun Yo. Ling Han had the demon birth sword, which was extremely sharp, while Hun Yo had sharp claws that could forcibly tear open the tentacle monster's skin, tearing off a large chunk of flesh with one move. Her violence level was terrifying. The gold-seeking rat shrunk into Zhu Xian Air's embrace and covered its eyes with its two little claws, no longer daring to. This little girl was too savage, and kept on thinking about its flesh, scaring it to death just thinking about it. The tentacle monster was furious, and waved more tentacles, launching an attack at Ling Han and Zhu Xian Air. However, there were only 8 tentacles in total, and as they waved, they stirred up the sea, rolling up a tsunami that was several dozen meters tall. This beast was truly enormous. Just the tentacles that were exposed above the sea were over 300 meters long, and the part in the water was definitely even larger, easily stirring up a furious tide. Ling Han originally wanted to charge into the sea and behead this tentacle monster's main body, but once he entered the sea, he discovered something was off. The pressure in the water was astonishingly great, squeezing his bones to the point of clanking. If he went deep into the sea, his entire body would be squeezed to pieces. After fighting for half a day, the tentacle monster still retreated in defeat, leaving behind a long tentacle. This was severed by Ling Han and Hun Yo's combined attack. One slashed with a sword, and one tore with a claw, forcibly leaving behind the opponent's enormous tentacle. If it weren't for that big monster might not have retreated. Ling Han stored this tentacle into the Black Tower, causing Wenren Qian, Li Fengyu, and Yuan Chenghe to be speechless. How big was this guy's spatial spirit tool, to be able to store such a large tentacle inside? There's grilled fish to eat. Hun Yo smiled happily. They advanced. This place obviously wasn't suitable for grilling fish, so they'd have to wait until they reached dry land before fixing it up. However, on the second day, they immediately encountered the tentacle monster's attack again, and it actually grew back the tentacle that was severed yesterday. It was obvious that the tentacle was a bit shorter, and the color was more tender. If it weren't so, Ling Han and the others would definitely think that it was another tentacle monster. The result of the battle was that the tentacle monster once again contributed a tentacle, which Ling Han stored into his bag. However, on the third day, it came again, and then left behind another tentacle. Everyone was speechless. Did you come to hunt, or to deliver gifts? On the fourth day, this tentacle monster came as promised. This time, Ling Han and the others had already formulated a battle strategy in advance. After Ling Han heavily wounded the tentacle monster with the annihilating dragon star arrow, the rock spirit and Hun Yo would work together to grab a tentacle and forcibly pull it up from the bottom of the sea. It was definitely a colossal creature, with a tentacle that was over 500 meters long, and then its body. To everyone's surprise, they originally thought that this was a super large octopus, but who would have thought that this big guy's body actually shrunk into a clamshell? This clamshell was naturally astonishingly large, and its 300-meter-long body was like a palace at the bottom of the sea. The battlefield moved into the air, and this tentacle monster's battle prowess was greatly reduced. It was ganged up on by everyone, and in the end, all 8 tentacles were chopped off, with no time to grow back. Then, the clamshell was also broken, and it was blasted into pieces. Ha! Everyone cried out in surprise, seeing that there was actually a gigantic pearl inside the clamshell. Even if they were very far away, they could still feel the spiritual chi emitted from the pearl, making people feel at ease as if they could comprehend the truth of martial arts. Such a large pearl needs at least 1,000 years to nurture, right? Li Feng, you guessed. Wenren Qian shook her head, and said, definitely more than that. I've seen 1,000-year-old pearls, and they were only fist-sized. This one is about the size of a millstone. Ling Han also nodded. He'd once obtained some 1,000-year-old pearls in his last life. Grinding them into powder and adding them into ingredients could greatly increase the effects of forming a pill. They were about the size of a fist, far from this one. The longer a creature lives, the rarer it is. This giant clam has lived for who knows how many years, possibly several thousand or 10,000 years. He said. According to my conjecture, this giant clam was captured by this tentacle monster, and even its shell was occupied by it, slowly digesting the pearl's power. The reason why it could grow new limbs so quickly is firstly because of its own characteristics, and secondly because of the benefits provided by this pearl. Zhu Xian'er was astonished, and said, in other words, this pearl is originally even larger. It should be so. Ling Han nodded. Rich, such a large pearl, how many origin crystals can it sell for? Li Fengyu's eyes were full of stars. Such a treasure, you actually want to use it to exchange for origin crystals. Yuan Chenghe sneered. Short-sighted. The gold-seeking rat was instantly displeased. How did baby offend you? It stared at Yuan Chenghe and ground its teeth, really wanting to bite someone. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, we should still thank this beast. Not only did it give us a large amount of beast meat, it also has a 10,000-year-old treasured pearl. I think, in the entire vast lands, this is unique. Clams that could live for 10,000 years were few in the first place, and normally, they only had a lifespan of a few hundred years. To raise a 10,000-year-old treasured pearl, not only did it have to live long, it also had to have good luck and not be injured by any living creature in between. In the end, this old clam also didn't escape its fate of being eaten. The tentacle monster's tentacles were all-pervasive and could bore into the old clam's closed shell, sucking the old clam's flesh and blood clean. It definitely met its nemesis. Ling Han put away the pearl. This pearl was too precious, and if it was broken and divided, then at least half of the essence within would be lost. That was something only an idiot would do. He put away the pearl and gave Li Fengyu, his sister, and Wenren Qian some spiritual liquid as compensation. Everyone was happy. After all, killing the tentacle monster was mainly Ling Han and Hunyou's credit. Yuan Chenghe also didn't get anything, but he wasn't dissatisfied. This was because Ling Han treated him as one of his own, and giving him something would be treating him as an outsider. His mentality also changed, from being unconvinced and resisting at the beginning to being sincerely convinced now, mainly because he realized the gap between him and Ling Han. However, at this moment, 3 people were seen flying over from afar, their target clear. 2 old men and 1 young man. The 2 old men were in the deity transformation tier, while the young man was in the flower blossom tier, impressively walking in front, appearing somewhat unusual. Martial arts was the place that paid the most attention to seniority. Hand over that precious pearl, and you guys can get lost, the young man ordered. When his gaze swept over Zhu Xian'er, his eyes involuntarily shone, and he pointed over, saying, she stays. All right, I'll sell it to you. Hunyou immediately clapped her hands in agreement. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 536. You want to refuse? Ling Han asked with a smile. Without waiting for the other party to reply, he directly plucked out a handful of the other party's hair, then picked up a strand and threw it into a jade bottle. I'll just call it the bottle of curses, he thought to himself. Then, he said, think carefully. You shouldn't be so threatening. Na Zhiyan wanted to cry, but had no tears. The previous 2 times he had been cursed had left him with lingering fear, especially the second time. He had directly lost his will to live, and now that he thought about it, it was really too terrifying. Obviously, Ling Han only needed to obtain one thing from him to be able to cast the curse. Now that he had a large amount of hair that Ling Han had taken, who knew how many times he would die? Moreover, who said that there were only two kinds of curses, abdominal pain and the desire to die? It is my honor not to work for young Master Han, Na Jiyen immediately said, his expression full of righteousness. Ling Han patted his shoulder and said, not bad, this is what I wanted to hear. One should be more open and loyal. Yes, young Master Han is right, Na Jiyen said seriously. Ling Han knocked him out with a single slap, then brought him out of the Black Tower. Though he had the control of the cursed tool, Ling Han still decided to keep the secret of the Black Tower as much as possible so that others would not know about it. After bringing Na Jiyen back to the Imperial City, Ling Han finally woke him up with a slap, and said, go. Oh, right, don't think that you won't be affected just because you've run far away. 3 days later, I'll let you have another good time. Young Master Han, I believe you. There's no need to try. Na Jiyen hurriedly waved his hands. How can I do that? If I don't try, how can I prove my sincerity? Ling Han said unhappily. Fine, was there a difference in sincerity and threats? Na Jiyen could only leave obediently. He had to complete this task. Only then would he have a chance of survival. As long as Xian Kongming died, then naturally no one would know what he had done. Cursing someone to death, haha, who would believe that there was such a thing? Just like how he had wanted to commit suicide before. Even if he really died, who would believe that he had actually been murdered? However, he was still slightly doubtful. Would that thing really be able to curse him after being separated by a great distance? This was something he had to confirm. Otherwise, even if he managed to deceive Xian Kongming and failed to curse him to death, he would still be dead. In the next 3 days, he traveled with all his might, wanting to get as far away from Ling Han as possible. He wanted to test if that treasure could really kill someone from thousands of miles away. He quickly entered the sea instead of flying in the sky. As soon as he entered the sea, his legs miraculously disappeared and turned into a long fishtail. With a flick of his tail, his speed instantly soared as he swam towards the depths of the sea. He was much faster than when he was flying on land. The sea race was indeed suited to living in the sea. Only in the sea could they maximize their combat strength. The bottom of the sea was very dark, but for flower blossom tier cultivators, it was nothing. Along the way, he saw familiar sights. Various sea races appeared one after another. Though flower blossom tier cultivators could not be considered ultimate elites of the sea race, they could still be considered as elites. Thus, as he traveled, a considerable number of sea races paid their respects to him. Some young girls of the sea race even threw flirtatious glances at him. This sea monster was famous for his beauty and charm, so he naturally attracted the attention of countless young girls. Ah! However, just as that lord was feeling very pleased with himself, an incredibly strange scene appeared. That lord actually fell to the bottom of the sea, and with his head touching the bottom, he spat out bubbles as he said, I am a stinky bug, just let me die. It really made people's eyeballs drop to the ground. It worked. All of a sudden, Na Jiyen did not know what he was feeling. However, there was only one thought in his mind, and that was that he had to complete the task that Ling Han had given him. Otherwise, he would definitely die. Ling Han temporarily did not think about the matter between Na Jiyen and Xian Kongming. In any case, if Na Jiyen could bring back something that belonged to Xian Kongming, then he would curse him to death. If that did not work, then he would immediately go to the middle state and let this guy chase after him. He returned home and went out for a few days, so he naturally had to have a good reunion with his family. If he could successfully resolve the matter with the sea race, then there would be no need for the Ling family to move. Otherwise, it would be better for them to move. Lu Yutong and the other 2 girls were all very affectionate, but Zhu Xian'er's injuries had already healed for a few days, so there was no reason to delay any longer. Thus, she took her leave first and sent the medicine to the half-moon sect. Then, she directly went to the extreme Yang city to wait for Ling Han. After staying for a few days, he went to the imperial city again, because he had an appointment with Na Zhiyan for 10 days. However, after staying in the imperial city for a day, Na Zhiyan returned. He handed over a bag and said, "Young Master Han, I only obtained 3 broken scales from Lord Kongming." He was afraid that Ling Han would not be satisfied, so he hurriedly added, "Lord Kongming is an ancient water-splitting beast, and the scales he sheds are treasured tools used to make armor. It is very difficult to obtain." Ling Han smiled, and said, "It's fine. As long as it's the scales shed from his body, it's fine." He knocked Na Zhiyan unconscious and stored him in the Black Tower. Then, he took out the vial of curses, crushed some of the broken scales, and stuffed them into the vial, directly activating the curse of death. Immediately, a flower bloomed. This meant that the curse had been successfully cast. Otherwise, if the opponent's level was too high and his fate was too strong, resulting in the curse not taking effect, then this flower would not have bloomed. A mighty elite of the deity transformation tier was cursed to death from 10,000 miles away just like that. Ling Han's heart trembled. There were all sorts of strange and bizarre techniques in this world. Perhaps there were other powers in this world that could similarly kill someone from 10,000 miles away. However, this kind of technique would definitely have its limits. Actually, as long as one was careful, it could be avoided. Since the curse had been successfully cast, Ling Han returned home, planning to stay for another 2 months before leaving for the extreme Yang city to meet up with Ing Hong and Zhu Xian and head to the middle state together. However, the peaceful days only lasted for half a month. On this day, a tide suddenly rose on the sea, and then there was great chaos. Although the Ling family lived in seclusion, there were always people going out. Soon, they found that there were more and more refugees in the town in recent days. After asking about the situation, he learned that an army had suddenly appeared on the sea, sweeping through everything in its path and advancing toward the royal capital. Marine Corps Ling Han was astonished. Could it be that Xian Kongming hadn't died? However, wasn't this guy usually very low-key? Why had he suddenly come with such great fanfare? He brought Hunyo with him, and hurried towards the imperial city. When he arrived, the army had yet to arrive, so he headed towards the ocean. After traveling for another day, the army on the ocean finally came into view. They didn't look too different from the human army, but they were all infantrymen. There were only about 1,000 of them. The soldiers in the front carried flags and wore scale armors. Their weapons were mainly spears and axes. In addition, many of them had webbing between their fingers. It was the same for their feet. They didn't wear shoes, so it could be clearly seen. Merfolk. Chapter 537. There were only over 1,000 soldiers in the army, but they were all at least in the spiritual pedestal tier, and there was only one carriage in the army. It was a carriage pulled by 2 seahorses, and the walls of the carriage were painted with ancient patterns. There were also many holes that had been pierced by weapons, but this did not affect the grandeur of the carriage, and instead made it look even more ancient and dignified. When Ling Han looked over, his mind suddenly went blank. All he saw was a huge hand appearing out of thin air, grabbing towards him. This giant hand was incomparably terrifying. It was as if even if the sky collapsed, it could withstand it with just a gentle lift. But upon closer inspection, it was actually a woman's hand. Her skin was snow-white and exquisite, almost perfect. Too strong. Ling Han did not have a second thought, and directly brought Hunyo into the Black Tower. His heart thumped madly. Although it was only for an instant, it was the most dangerous moment he had ever been in this life. If he was just a little bit late, he would definitely be caught by that large hand, and definitely wouldn't be able to enter the Black Tower again. High-level Heaven Tier, even shattering Void Tier. Ling Han shook his head. His opponent's strength was unfathomably powerful, and he himself only had a sliver of Heaven Tier divine sense. Perhaps he could see through the cultivation of ordinary Heaven Tier martial artists, But high-level heaven-tier martial artists were like a dense fog. Moreover, the sea race had shattering void-tier elites. One thing was certain, and that was that the expert in the carriage was definitely not Xian Kongming. He was only in the deity transformation realm. Ha! A sound of surprise came from within the carriage. "My lord, what's wrong?" one of the Oceanid warriors immediately asked. "A very interesting flea," said the person in the carriage. Her voice was charming and seemed to possess boundless charm. The eyes of that sea race warrior wandered about, as if he wanted to find the flea that the princess had mentioned. However, how could he possibly discover the Black Tower? Naturally, his efforts were futile. He teleported away. The person in the carriage said, but then she murmured softly, "Did he really teleport away? I don't think I sensed any spatial fluctuations, but if he didn't teleport, how could he suddenly disappear?" As the wheels rolled, the army continued to advance toward the imperial capital. Only when this army completely disappeared did Ling Han and Hu Niu appear from the Black Tower. "Scared Niu to death, that woman is so annoying," Hu Niu said, patting her chest. Ling Han nodded. This was a mighty figure of the sea race, and he was unbelievably strong. Could it be that Na Zhiyan had given himself away? Otherwise, after he had cursed Xian Kongming to death, all of this should have come to an end. Why would an army of the sea race suddenly appear, and why would an inconceivably powerful woman appear? Suspected to be a high-level heaven tier or even a shattering void tier ultimate elite, running amok in a place like the North region, who could stop her? Ling Han dragged Na Zhiyan out and recounted what had just happened. Then, he asked, "Who is that woman? Also, who else did you tell about this matter?" Na Zhiyan was on the verge of tears. How would he dare to reveal such a secret to anyone? If the sea race knew that he had participated in the matter of cursing Xian Kongming to death, he would definitely be chopped into 8 pieces. He said in a trembling voice, that person should be the 7th princess of the royal clan, Lady Helian Sun Shui. "What's her cultivation level?" Ling Han asked. "It is said to be at the sky human stage." Na Zhiyan thought for a moment, then said with certainty, "Should be at the heaven tier." The 7th princess is the most outstanding genius of the Helian royal clan, but has yet to advance into the shattering void tier. Ling Han had heard him say that there were 3 great royal clans in the North Sea, Helian, Xianyu, and Wenren. They all had ultimate elites of the shattering void tier overseeing them, and were equivalent to a great sect in the middle state. Whether Helian Sun Shui was in the shattering void tier or not, even if she was only in the heaven tier, she would still be able to sweep through the North region. Moreover, Ling Han felt that she was far stronger than he had been in his last life. As for whether she could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Sword Emperor and the others, that was hard to judge, because he had not even seen her once. Thinking about it, she should have gone for the Vial of Curses. Otherwise, the timing would not be so coincidental. But since Na Zhiyan had not leaked the secret, how did she know about this? Could it be that Xian Kongming had leaked the secret before his death? Ling Han thought for a moment, then once again knocked Na Zhiyan unconscious and threw him into the Black Tower. Then, he, too, headed towards the Imperial City. He took a detour and overtook the army of the sea race, arriving at the Imperial City ahead of time. To be honest, the advance of this army was really not very fast. But no matter how slow it was, after another 2 days, the sea race still arrived outside the Imperial City. Everyone in Fire Country acted as if they were facing a great enemy. On the city walls, everyone drew their swords and nocked their arrows. A great battle was about to break out at any moment. However, in front of an army where even the weakest was in the spiritual pedestal tier, they really could not withstand a single blow. This could not be considered an army, and could only be considered Helian Sun Shui's guards. After all, there were too few of them. "I don't care who obtained that thing, immediately hand it over. Otherwise, 3 days later, I will cause a furious wave that will drown the whole desolate north." Helian Sun Shui's pleasant yet cold voice was heard from within the carriage. She released a sliver of her aura, and instantly, the world seemed to lose its color. Pa, 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 the weapons in everyone's hands fell to the ground. Aside from those who had the aptitude of a king among martial artists, everyone else knelt on the ground. Everyone was shocked. They had not even fought, and it was already like this. The opponent's strength was practically hair-raising. What to do? They had absolutely no idea what that thing the opponent spoke of was, so how could they hand it over? Speaking of which, they were really unlucky. A few days ago, someone charged into the imperial palace and was forced to sign a treaty, which was extremely humiliating. Now, someone charged into the imperial city and threatened them. Yet, they did not have the slightest bit of temper. Although the woman in the carriage did not show her face, no one dared to doubt her words. She only let out a little bit of her aura, and everyone knew that this was definitely not a joke. She had this kind of strength, and at the same time, would do so. Ling Han frowned. Now, he was completely sure that what she wanted was the vial of curses. After a slight hesitation, he let Hunyo enter the Black Tower first, and then ascended the city walls. "Milord! Milord! Milord!" When it was Ling Han's turn, everyone knelt down one after another as if they had met their savior. Ling Han laughed and said, "Don't count on me. Now, even 10,000 of me added together would not be a match for a single finger of hers." Hearing Ling Han say so, everyone looked disappointed. Even Ling Han was not a match for her, so what could they do? Ling Han looked into the distance, and said loudly, "We can talk, but if you make a move against me again, I will immediately leave, and I guarantee that you will never find me again." Impudence! How dare you speak to my master like this? The warriors of the sea race all shouted. In their hearts, Hellion Sun Shui was a godlike existence, and could not tolerate the slightest bit of blasphemy. A mere human actually wanted to have a talk with their master? Wishful thinking. Yet a voice was heard from within the carriage and said, "Then let's talk." Obviously, after having Ling Han slip away once, Hellion Sun Shui at least acknowledged Ling Han's ability to escape. Otherwise, she would have directly captured him for interrogation, and he would not even have the right to talk. Chapter 538. Ling Han smiled slightly. He knew that the other party would definitely be willing to talk. "I have a few questions to consult your highness," he said loudly. "Oh, then answer one of my questions first. Otherwise, there's no need to talk," Hellion Shue said indifferently. "Is that bottle in your hands?" As expected. Ling Han did not deny it and said, "Yes, it's indeed in my hands." There was a moment of silence in the carriage. He did not know if Hellion Shue was too excited and was trying to control her emotions. After a while, he heard her say, "All right, what do you want to know?" "How does your highness know about this bottle?" Ling Han asked. "Some things should not be known by too many people." "Let's talk somewhere else," Hellion Shue said. Ling Han nodded, and said, "All right, follow me. Don't get too close. Otherwise, if I'm frightened, I might never appear again." Hellion Shue snorted coldly, appearing very displeased. Ling Han walked in front, while the sea race followed behind, and the direction that Ling Han took was naturally towards that mine. If impressively Sun Shui really wanted to make a move, he would bring the sea race into the mine and kill them with a trap. The speed of the sea race on land was not fast. Fortunately, the mine was not far from the imperial city. Thus, in less than half an hour, they also arrived at the place. "Stop!" Hellion Shue stopped the carriage from afar, and said loudly, "Human, this is the ancient mine." He could not hide it from her. Ling Han stopped and turned around, and said, "That's right." A figure walked out of the carriage, but her entire body was wrapped in rays of purple divine light, and her appearance could not be seen at all. Even height, male or female, could not be distinguished. One could only vaguely see that she wore emerald green clothes, and her hair was extremely long. "All of you wait here," she ordered. "Yes, your highness." Everyone obeyed. Helian Xuanxue took a step and approached Ling Han. She had enough confidence that as long as the distance was close enough, she could directly take down Ling Han. She would not give him any chance to use the teleportation talisman to escape. Close enough, Ling Han said with a smile. In fact, with his divine sense, he could let the other party come a little closer, but there was no need to let the other party know his limits and trump cards. Helian Xuanxue couldn't help but sigh in her heart. If she attacked from this distance, she only had a 30% chance of success. Your Highness, you can speak now, Ling Han said. Helian Sun Shui snorted lightly. A mere flower blossom tier cultivator acted as if he was on equal footing with her, making her feel really displeased. But for the sake of that bottle, she still endured her rage and said, actually, it was I who intentionally leaked this information to Xian Kongming. Ling Han was astonished. Xian Kongming was just a chess piece. Using a cursed weapon to kill someone, there were no traces to follow. No matter how bizarre the death was, it was still a normal death. This was because the murderer did not need to do it himself, so how could he give himself away? But using a cursed weapon proved one thing. Either the opponent's strength was too strong, and they couldn't take it head-on. Secondly, perhaps the other party's status was too special, so he couldn't make a move on them openly. What kind of situation did Helian Sun Shui belong to? So, after Xian Kongming died mysteriously, you immediately guessed that he was killed by a cursed weapon, so you brought people to attack, Ling Han guessed. That's right. After a long time, you obviously ran, and how could I still find you? Helian Sun Shui said. Ling Han was curious, and said, you're at least a high-level heaven-tier being. You want a cursed weapon, could it be that you want to kill a shattering void-tier cultivator? If it could really curse a shattering void-tier cultivator to death, then what level would the jade bottle be? Divine tool. You don't need to worry about that. Helian Sun Shui snorted, and said, this kind of treasured tool is not something you can possess. Give it to me, and I can guarantee your safety, and I can compensate you with a spirit tool. Oh, what spirit tool, is it that precious? Ling Han unleashed the demon birth sword. Very obviously, Helian Sun Shui's figure stiffened slightly. She definitely saw the grade of the demon birth sword. A 10th tier spirit tool, what could she take out to move Ling Han? She really underestimated this human, his wealth was a bit shocking. She paused, and then said, I am determined to get that bottle, so I advise you to hand it over. Otherwise, even if you flee to the ends of the world, I will find you. Ling Han cracked a smile, and said, really? Are you sure that wherever I go, you will also go? Helian Sun Shui snorted coldly, and was about to boast, but immediately reacted, and said towards the front, is this what you're relying on to hide in the ancient mine? Naive, she said coldly. Since the cursed weapon has been taken out, the cursed chi here will begin to drop, and who is this North Sea's royal family? My fate is determined by the heavens, so how could I be harmed by these cursed chi? Quite at Sundara, but unfortunately, she had no idea what changes had occurred here, and the cursed chi was nothing at all. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, then come and chase me. Maybe if you catch up to me, I'll let you, hee hee hee. He broke into a run and entered the ancient mine. Helian Sun Shui didn't know what hee 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 meant, but thinking that it couldn't be anything good, she immediately snorted coldly and chased after him. Ling Han didn't care, and attacked wildly. He wanted to lure out the 12 ancient corpses below, or the blood lake would do, and the silver divine spider was even more ideal. In short, as long as he could suppress Helian Sun Shui, it would be fine. And after this battle, would there still be sea race that dared to come? Refusing a toast, only to drink a forfeit. Helian Sun Shui snorted coldly, and struck out with her palm. Origin power turned into a beautiful large hand, pressing down towards Ling Han. Before the palm force arrived, the terrifying pressure had already cracked the skin all over Ling Han's body, and blood sprayed wildly. One had to know that he had the body of iron sheet, and his body was as hard as rare metals of the same level, but his skin was cracked by the pressure. If he really took a palm, would he still be alive? What a strong bitch! Ling Han exclaimed, and threw out the two god corpses with both hands. He didn't intend to take them back. This place should be good for burying the two god corpses. The 12 ancient corpses definitely had great origins, and wouldn't be weaker than these two god corpses. Ha! Hellion Sun Shui stopped. She arrived in front of the two god corpses, and a look of surprise appeared on her beautiful face that outsiders couldn't see. These are god corpses. She murmured softly, and the look of disbelief became even more intense. Ling Han actually had two god corpses on him. This human was truly strange. However, the divinity essence of the two god corpses had already been completely lost, and this was the mortal realm, with its own rules. God-level elites weren't stronger than shattering void tier elites, and he wanted to scare her with two god corpses. Naive. With a casual wave, she separated the two god corpses. Since the divinity essence had already been completely lost, it had lost any value, and she didn't bother to put it away. You can't run, Hellion Sun Shui said coldly. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, Who said I ran? He already arrived at the place where the vial of curses was placed, and shot out a punch. The terrifying origin power, added with his body's brute force, formed an extremely terrifying destructive power. Pang! A pillar of blood soared into the sky. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 539. The test was very simple. One didn't have to fight this puppet. One only had to place one's palm on a stone tablet. If a light flashed, one would be qualified to enter the artifact pavilion. It sounded so simple, but there were pitifully few people who could make the stone tablet light up. Other than the powerful figures of the older generation, there were only Yao Huiyu, Su Xiuran, Dong Ling and a few others in the younger generation. Just put your hand on the stone tablet. There was a newcomer who asked curiously. Of course not. You have to meditate on all of your martial skills and cultivation techniques in your sea of consciousness. The stone tablet will magnify the power of these secret techniques to the limit and evaluate your ultimate battle prowess. An old antique said. This is the martial Dao stone, a legendary treasure. Even if you're only in the flower blossom tier, it's possible to surpass the shattering void tier, because this evaluates the battle prowess of the pinnacle tier, or in other words, puts everyone's tier on the same level, and then compares their battle prowess. Such a ranking should be said to be a ranking of potential. It's possible that you'll be far from reaching such a level in the future, or it's also possible that you'll have a fortuitous encounter and might surpass in the future. That old antique said, not really. There are 100 names on the stone tablet, and if your pinnacle tier battle prowess can surpass any one of them, you can be ranked among them. The stronger your battle prowess is in the future, the higher your ranking will be. However, although this mystery realm has opened for the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, this martial Dao stone is very likely to record all the geniuses of the past million years, or even millions of years. To be able to leave one's name on it, even if it's only the last place, is a super genius that's hard to come by in tens of thousands of years. Hearing that old antique's words, everyone was a bit excited. If they could leave their name on the stone tablet, wouldn't that shock the ancients and surpass the contemporaries? However, the difficulty was too high. A few people had already entered the tool pavilion, but none of them left their name on the stone tablet. Ling Han walked over. The person who ranked first on the stone tablet was actually called first. Who knew where he got his courage from? Did he think no one had ever done it before, and no one would be able to do it in the future? The second place was much more modest, and his name was Origin. The third place was called For Directions, the fourth was Shadow, the fifth was Moon, the sixth was Gu, the seventh was Bai, the eighth was Ming Dao, the ninth was Donkey Riding Old Man, and the 10th was 9 Paths. Ling Han went down, and every name was extremely unfamiliar. But when he came to the 99th place, a familiar name finally jumped into his eyes, Lunar King. His heart trembled. Had this just been left behind by the Lunar King, or had it been several 100,000 years ago? If it was the latter, could the Purple Moon Empire and this ancient dynasty be related? For a moment, Ling Han was lost in thought, and only came back to his senses after Zhu Xian'er called him a few times. Let's go and give it a try. They pushed through the crowd, wanting to push forward. Some people were easy to talk to, and they themselves had already tried and failed, so what if they gave it to others? However, some people had bad tempers and were even more jealous. They couldn't enter themselves, so they didn't want others to enter. Towards such people, there was naturally no need to be polite. Ling Han directly attacked. Shoo, 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 the dog blocking the way was swung out like a scarecrow. Wang, the stone tablet ahead glowed, which meant that someone had passed the test and could enter the tool pavilion. That's Wenren Qian. As expected of a daughter blessed by the heavens. They all say that her strength is second only to Dong Ling, and it's indeed true. Che, do you know what light appeared when Dong Ling passed? I don't know. Let me tell you, the martial arts stone can only emit light of 3 colors. One is red, one is green, and one is purple. Among them, purple light represents the weakest battle prowess, and red light is the strongest. Just now, Wenren Qian triggered purple light. But Dong Ling triggered red light. With that said, everyone nodded. They were both daughters blessed by the heavens, but Wenren Qian was still a long distance away from Dong Ling. Brother Ling. When it came to Ling Han, Wenren Qian couldn't help but pause. She didn't immediately enter the tool pavilion. Anyway, it wouldn't matter if she waited a little longer. She wanted to see Ling Han's extreme battle prowess with her own eyes. Although this didn't mean that Ling Han could really reach such heights in the future, it could still be used as a reference. Ling Han nodded, which was considered a greeting. Jia Ming is here. Everyone dispersed. This was a fiend who killed without any scruples, but he was the most valued disciple of the Earth Dragon sect's next generation. Who would dare to harm him? Jia Ming strode over, a terrifying aura rising all over his body as he turned into multiple large snakes. Ling Han couldn't help but frown. Jia Ming's cultivation showed a shocking leap, and he actually reached the deity transformation tier. He once said that there was a fateful encounter for him in the ocean, and it was indeed true. In a short few days, he broke through to the deity transformation tier. In the younger generation, only Su Xiu managed to do so. However, wasn't the Earth Dragon an earthworm? Why did the majority of the people of the Earth Dragon sect manifest the shadow of large snakes? Although they were all long and wriggling things, there was still a huge difference between snakes and earthworms, right? Jia Ming walked like a dragon or a tiger, and it was as if there was an ancient savage beast hidden within his body, extremely terrifying. As the earth rumbled, he walked in front of the martial arts stone, and first gave Ling Han a murderous look, then reached out and pressed towards the martial arts stone. Wang, the martial arts stone immediately shone. Purple light. However, Jia Ming didn't let go of his hand, and continued to press. The light emitted by the martial arts stone changed color, becoming green. This meant that Jia Ming's extreme battle prowess had increased, which was very normal. Pressing one's hand on it required one to develop one's own secret technique in the sea of consciousness. After the martial arts stone accepted it, it would continue to deduce, judge the extreme battle prowess, and then display it. Thus, the highest battle prowess couldn't be surpassed, but one could conceal one's strength. My battle prowess will break through the ages. Jia Ming shouted loudly, and his whole body surged with blood qi, forming a terrifying pressure. Hong, the people nearby all fell to the ground, actually unable to withstand his impact. Ling Han's expression was solemn. His strength and Jia Ming's were originally about the same, and now that the latter impressively stepped into the deity transformation tier, Ling Han was definitely inferior in terms of physical arts alone. If the latter's battle prowess soared straight to the heaven tier, then Ling Han would really be in trouble. It turned red. Heavens! Everyone hugged their heads and exclaimed. As expected, he was a heaven-bestowed genius, making the martial arts stone show red, sharing the limelight with Dong Ling, and Su Xiu ran. Ah! Jiao Ming roared again, blue veins throbbing on his forehead, and the shadow of a large snake appeared behind him, hissing. Wang, the martial arts stone showed black light. The 100 names from before all disappeared, and 2 words appeared on the stone tablet, leave name. Jiao Ming's strength had reached the level of being on par with ancient geniuses, and could at least be ranked in the top 100. Chapter 540. With a single strike from the giant silver spider, Hellion Sun Shui actually lost her memories? This was very possible. Because her divine sense suffered a shattering void tear attack, amnesia was a very normal thing. The problem was this temporary amnesia, or permanent amnesia? If it was temporary, then how long would the amnesia last? A few days, a few months, or a few years? Ling Han was astonished. He discovered that he couldn't sense any origin power fluctuations from her body. Could it be that after she lost her memories, she couldn't even circulate origin power? That was also possible. Ling Han couldn't be sure, but since this sea-race princess couldn't circulate origin power, then what threat was there? One had to know that martial artists could overturn mountains and seas because they cultivated origin power. Without origin power, martial artists' power wouldn't be much higher than normal people's, and their defense wouldn't be much higher. If you made a flower blossom tier warrior not circulate origin power to defend, and then had a normal soldier attack with 10,000 arrows, it was guaranteed that he'd be shot into a hornet's nest. However, Hellion Sun Shui still had a spirit tool that could automatically awaken, so it was practically impossible to kill her. Ling Han sighed. He actually couldn't do anything to a woman who couldn't fight back. Now, he could only hope that this sea-race princess lost her memories long enough for him to grow to a level where he wouldn't be afraid of her. Hellion Sun Shui stared blankly at Ling Han. There was hope in her eyes, as if she was hoping that Ling Han could tell her who she was. In her sea-blue eyes, there was a lovely and moving expression. Ling Han felt that this woman was a bit cute now. Previously, she was so arrogant, but now she was like a pitiful puppy. He couldn't help but laugh, and said, "I'm Ling Han, and you're Hellion Sun Shui. Do you have any impression of this name?" Hellion Sun Shui. Hellion Sun Shui. The sea-race princess kept shaking her head, almost biting a finger in her mouth. After a long while, she revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. "I'm Hellion Sun Shui." Ling Han retreated in defeat. This woman still had the attribute of being stupid and cute. Where are we? Why are we here? What is my relationship with you? Hellion Sun Shui asked in one breath, like a curious baby. Ling Han thought about it and said, "This is the Fire Nation. As for you, I picked you up. I don't know who you really are. As for this place, let's just stroll around. Once we're done, we can go our separate ways. Goodbye." He turned around and was about to leave. He really did not want to stay by the side of a high-level heaven-tier warrior. Who knew when this woman would recover her memories, and if she suddenly attacked him at that time, he would be done for. His heart could not soften Pa, but he had just taken a step when he felt his legs tighten. He had actually been hugged by Hellion Sun Shui. The woman was like a shrew, sitting on the ground without a care for her image, her hands hugging one of his legs. More importantly, this woman was terrifyingly strong. Ling Han actually couldn't break free. How is that possible? Wasn't she unable to use her elemental energy? How could she still have such powerful strength? Could it be? Ling Han immediately came to a realization. This woman was the same as him, and had also cultivated body arts. Now, she was using pure physical strength, so he reckoned that she had at least reached the spiritual infant tier, which was why Ling Han felt as if he had been locked by godly gold, unable to move at all. Let go," he said. "No." Hellion Sun Shui said very resolutely. As expected, she didn't let go. On the contrary, she tightened her grip. Fuck. Ling Han's leg bones instantly made ka sounds. He formed body of iron sheet and his physique was as tough as rare metals of the same tier, but the problem was, could 6th-tier rare metals block at least 7th-tier brute force? If this continued, it was extremely possible that his leg bones would be forcibly broken. Ling Han hurriedly surrendered, and said, all right, I'll let you continue to follow, okay? Hellion Sun Shui lost her memories, but her intelligence didn't seem to decrease because of this. She raised her head and looked at Ling Han with a doubtful gaze, and said, really, you didn't lie to me, whoever lies to you is a sea demon. Ling Han said randomly. Hellion Sun Shui was of the sea race, and didn't have any conflict with the sea demon's words. She let go of her hand, then climbed up, but immediately grabbed onto one of Ling Han's hands, as if still afraid he'd slip away. Ling Han bared his teeth. If this sea race princess recovered her memories and found out that she'd once held hands with him, who knew if she'd flown into a rage out of humiliation and cut him into hundreds or thousands of pieces. Hai Nyo, remember, you took the initiative to hold my hand, don't act shamelessly in the future, he said seriously. Oh. Hellion Sun Shui lost her memories, so it naturally didn't matter. No, you have to make an oath. Ling Han wanted to put a band-tightening curse on her as much as possible. This way, if she recovered her memories in the future, he could also speak nonsense to anger her, winning a chance for him to escape. What oath? Hellion Sun Shui asked, a bit dumbfounded. Just say that it was you who took the initiative to hold my hand. If you make a false accusation, the Sea Emperor is a big idiot, Ling Han said. Hellion Sun Shui obviously didn't doubt him, and raised her fair and slender right hand to make an oath. A thought flashed through Ling Han's mind. Could he make use of the vial of curses? Although her current appearance was a bit silly and adorable, he only had to think about her previous appearance to know that this woman was definitely a decisive killer. Once she recovered her memories, she'd become a fish on Ling Han's chopping board. He wanted to pull her hair, but the pendant immediately lit up, blocking his hand. Ling Han was helpless, and said, pluck it out and send it to me. Hellion Sun Shui bit her teeth and fingers. After a while, she shook her head, and said, no. Why not? Ling Han was surprised. Could it be that she'd started to recover her memories? I seem to remember Mother saying that I can't just give things on a man, Hellion Sun Shui said seriously. This, Ling Han thought, and said, then there's no problem with the woman. He could let Hu Nyo out. No. Hellion Sun Shui shook her head stubbornly. Ling Han was speechless. Why, he couldn't even deceive a silly and cute woman who'd lost her memories, what a failure. AI. He sighed, and walked away. Hellion Sun Shui hurriedly followed, one hand grabbing onto the corner of Ling Han's clothes, like a little wife who'd been wronged. Ling Han walked to the position of the Sea Race Army, and saw that it was a bloody scene. Everyone had exploded and died, and there wasn't a complete corpse here. It was all shattered bones and flesh, and the ground was covered with blood. Ah! Hellion Sun Shui revealed a look of fear, and couldn't help but throw herself into Ling Han's arms, hugging him tightly. Ka, Ling Han's ribs instantly cracked. Fuck, be gentler. With you strangling me like this, I'll be the same as the people on the ground, bursting from your hug. Moreover, her small chest really didn't have any layers. He didn't feel 2 lumps of flesh pressing against his chest at all. If you don't let me go, I am going to die, Ling Han said, panting. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 541. Hellion Sun Shui finally let go, but hid herself behind Ling Han, clutching tightly to the corner of his clothes. Ling Han could clearly feel her trembling. Such a domineering woman actually had such a soft side. Would amnesia change a person's personality greatly, or would it expose the side hidden in the bottom of her heart? Ling Han didn't know, and didn't care. The biggest problem now was how to throw away such a burden. She was practically a ticking time bomb, and when she recovered her memory, it would explode. Just thinking about it made him unable to sleep. "Hai Nyo, try and see how fast you can run," Ling Han said. He'd already brought Helian Sun Shui far away from the mine, lest she got emotional again and strangled him into a corpse. "Oh." Helian Sun Shui nodded, then asked curiously, "Why do you call me Hai Nyo?" "I'm happy." Ling Han glared at her. Helian Sun Shui instantly teared up, curling her lips in grievance, and said, "Why are you so fierce to me?" Ling Han instantly bared his teeth. "Cry all you want, but why did you have to strangle his neck with one hand? Didn't she know this would kill him?" However, he didn't dare to throw away such a ticking time bomb. Otherwise, if she went berserk, even the physical power of the spiritual infant tier would be extremely terrifying. Moreover, this was only his guess. What if the other party's body technique had also reached the heaven tier? "I won't be fierce to you, alright?" Ling Han sighed. Facing Helian Sun Shui in her complete state, he didn't lose at all, and even tricked her. If she didn't have a powerful spirit tool on her, she'd already be tricked to death. But now, her origin power couldn't be channeled, and her intelligence became very gratifyingly high, but she actually suppressed Ling Han instead. This made Ling Han unable to understand. Why was it like this? Helian Sun Shui let go, with an expression that said, "If you dare be fierce to me, I'll continue strangling you," looking very much like a little wife. Ling Han broke out in a cold sweat. He had already had so much physical contact with her. After this woman regained her memory, she would definitely fly into a rage out of humiliation. Moreover, he had almost measured the size of her flat chest. "Then let's go." His legs exerted force, and his entire body instantly shot into the sky. Helian Xuanxue hurriedly followed suit, but she was faster than Ling Han, and also jumped higher, immediately surpassing Ling Han. At first, she was shocked that she could jump so high, but she immediately became excited and let out a clear and melodious laugh. Ling Han sighed. If only she could always be like this. He could just leave the fighting and killing to the men. A thought flashed through his mind. Could he use this period of time to instill in Helian Xuanxue some notions of peace and beauty? Even though he had lost his memories, this experience would become part of his memories in the future, and it would definitely affect him. To train with one's own hands very evil, but I like it. Even though the two of them did not use any movement techniques, just the brute force of their bodies was frighteningly shocking, and the advantage of brute force was that it could last for a long time, just like demonic beasts, unlike martial artists who were limited by the size of their Dantian's spiritual ocean, and would become a cripple once their origin power was used up. Thus, the two of them sprinted for more than an hour, and had already arrived at the small town where the Ling family resided, but neither of them was out of breath. Ling Han was a little anxious. Bringing this girl home was risky, and he hoped that she would not go on a killing spree. But in order to instill the notions of peace and happiness in this girl, he had to let this girl experience love and care. They entered the Ling family, and when the servants saw Ling Han, they all bowed respectfully, but they were not as uneasy as the servants of other families, and were instead filled with a sense of intimacy. Afterwards, Ling Dongxing and Yu Hongchang ran out as well. Their son had left for another few days, and it made them feel as if several years had passed. "This is..." Yu Hongchang was astounded. Her son was truly capable. In just a few days, he had actually lured back a beautiful wife. Wasn't that so? The big girl had a bashful and timid appearance, grabbing onto the corner of her son's clothes, and clinging to him. TSK, truly beautiful, and she also had a pair of blue eyes that were different from normal people's. Her figure was really good, especially her thighs, which were really slender, and her little butt was perked up high, showing astonishing elasticity. Only her breasts were a little small. No matter, even if they gave birth, it was not necessary for them to drink her milk. Yu Hongchang had already thought of things that would happen a long, long time later, and a smile immediately blossomed on her face. She walked over, and said, "Miss, what is your name?" She completely ignored her son. My name is Helian Sun Shui, the Sea Race Princess said. Miss, come. Yu Hongchang took Helian Sun Shui's hand and left. Naturally, she was going to teach her mother-in-law the mental technique, and how to control her son. Ling Dongxing patted Ling Han's shoulder sympathetically, and the father and son looked at each other, speechless. Ling Han let Hunyao out. When the little girl saw Helian Sun Shui, a fierce look instantly appeared on her face. This woman gave her a strong sense of oppression, giving her the urge to bite off the other's neck. Come, let's eat, Ling Han said, smiling. Hunyao immediately put on a smile, and eagerly followed. The matter of the sea race obviously couldn't end just like that. After all, the death of a princess would cause a huge uproar. However, the battle of the mind could be felt even by those far away in the imperial city, and if the sea race wanted to investigate, it definitely wouldn't end well for them. With that giant silver spider keeping watch, the desolate north probably had nothing to worry about. What worried Ling Han was instead that ancient mine. What was buried underneath? Just 12 ancient corpses and a spider as big as a mountain. He didn't believe it. But with the giant silver spider, could he go deeper? If he wanted to know what was buried underneath the ancient mine, he needed to be stronger, at least recovering the cultivation of the heaven tier and relying on the Black Tower to have the power to explore. The safest way was obviously to enter the Shattering Void tier, and he could barge in from the front. He planned to stay at home for a dozen or so days, and then set out for the middle state. Lu Yutong and Li Sichan both decided to stay at the Ling family and wait for Ling Han to return. Firstly, they already had sufficient cultivation resources, and secondly, to protect the Ling family, Li Sichan still had to concoct spirit pills for Ling Dongxing and his wife. Under Ling Han's guidance, Li Sichan improved very quickly in alchemy. Now, she was only limited by her tier, or else she would already be able to leap into black-grade high-level alchemist. Their strategy was to save the country in a roundabout way. As long as they served their parents-in-law well, how could they be afraid that Ling Han wouldn't acknowledge them? Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiu were also left behind by Ling Han to protect the Ling family. Their talent in martial art was limited, and if they wanted to break through to the flower blossom tier, they would need at least a dozen or so years of accumulation. They wouldn't be of much help if they followed Ling Han, so it was better for them to stay at the Ling family and cultivate properly. Thus, a dozen or so days later, Ling Han brought along Hunyao and Helian Sun Shui and set out for the extreme Yang city. This Hunyao really couldn't be shaken off. Even though Yu Hongchang had already tricked her into calling her mother, she was like a newly born little bird. The first person she saw was Ling Han, and she was determined to follow Ling Han. Chapter 542. Bringing the two girls, one big and one small, Ling Han headed to the extreme Yang city. Hunyao and Helian Sun Shui were natural enemies. The two fought for food, and also fought to stick to Ling Han. Hunyao finally met her match, because Helian Sun Shui's appetite was no weaker than hers. Moreover, she was born with great strength, and could always occupy an advantageous position. Ling Han interrogated Na Zhiyan again, and learned that the Helian royal family had true dragon bloodline. The royal family of the Central Sea had the purest true dragon bloodline, and every generation Sea Emperor was revered by the Four Seas, fully deserving of the title of king. The royal family of the Four Seas were not simple either. They also had true dragon bloodline, but were slightly inferior in terms of purity. No wonder. Ling Han nodded. He cultivated the 9 dragons tyrant body art, and after mastery, he could possess the power of 9 true dragons. Why did he compare it with true dragons? Because true dragons were divine beasts with the strongest physical strength. Helian Sun Shui had true dragon bloodline, and even if it wasn't pure, her physical strength was definitely terrifying. Hunyao was a freak, but the difference in tier was too great, so it was normal that she couldn't win. After all, Ling Han cultivated the 9 dragons tyrant body art, so there was nothing he could do. Helian Sun Shui was like a blank piece of paper that could be written at will. Ling Han tried his best to let her accept happy things. Even if she played around with Hun Yo, it was a kind of fun, and not a fight to the death between enemies. In comparison, Hun Yo was more like an adult, never crying or making a fuss. However, Hellion Sun Shui cried and made a fuss. She obviously had terrifying brute strength, but would often widen her eyes in grievance, looking like she was about to cry. She was addicted to acting cute. They passed through the Fallen Moon Gorge and entered the North region. With their speed, they obviously didn't need a few months to reach the extreme Yang city. In only 10 days, they returned to this ancient city. Previously, they had been on their way, and although they passed through many cities, they didn't enter them. Thus, after entering the city, Hellion Sun Shui immediately became excited, walking here, stopping there. Take the cotton candy. Take the sugar man. Take the childhood sweetheart. Ling Han could only continue to pay for her from behind. This Hai Nyo was a little crazy, laughing happily as she ate. Childish, Hun Yo said disdainfully, but forgot that she was also holding a candy figurine in her hand, and was currently licking it happily. Hey, where did this chick come from? She's so pretty. Hellion Sun Shui was like a fairy, beautiful and full of exotic charm. Naturally, she was especially eye-catching, and very quickly, she was targeted by others. He was a spoiled brat who was staring lecherously at Hellion Sun Shui's beautiful face, his saliva almost flowing out. However, when his gaze shifted downwards, wanting to look at Hellion Sun Shui's mound of nostalgia, he was stunned, and hurriedly shifted his gaze downwards again. Too bad, flat chest. Hellion Shui tilted her head and looked at him. She asked in confusion, "Why are you blocking my way?" The second-generation ancestor chuckled and said, "Little girl, come back with me, let's have some fun." He was obviously used to being unbridled. He waved his hand and said, "Bring her back for me." "Yes, young master." Four strong servants immediately pounced out from behind him, all of them like wolves and tigers. Hellion Sun Shui screamed in fright and hurriedly fled back to Ling Han's side. With her speed, not many people could catch up. Moreover, so what if they caught up? If she rammed into him with brute force, Ling Han's bones would probably be broken. She obviously had terrifying strength, but purposely pretended to be weak, not afraid of being struck by lightning. Ling Han ridiculed inwardly, and said to Hellion Sun Shui, "Trash like this is called taking advantage of power to bully others. Hai Nyo, don't you think this kind of person is hateful?" Hellion Sun Shui hurriedly nodded, patted her chest, and said with lingering fear, "Damn it, scared me to death." "So, we can't be this kind of person, right?" Ling Han guided patiently. "Right, we can't be this kind of person." Hellion Sun Shui nodded. "However, we can't be bullied by this kind of trash. Remember, we can't take the initiative to provoke others, that's not right. But if others provoke us, we can't be lenient. When it's time to fight back, we have to fight back. We're not punching bags, right?" Ling Han said again. This speech was too long, and Hellion Sun Shui was a little confused, but she still nodded habitually, and said, "Right. Who the fuck do you think you are, daring to meddle in this young master's business?" The second-generation ancestor was dissatisfied. Did these two people treat him as if he didn't exist, and actually started chatting condescendingly? He waved his hand, and said, "Cripple this man, then bring the woman back to the manor." "Yes, young master." The four servants pounced over again. Ling Han flicked his finger, and a stream of energy turned into 4 wisps, hitting the foreheads of the 4 servants respectively. Immediately, poof, 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 a bloody hole appeared on the foreheads of the 4 people, and they fell to the ground with a loud bang. You're so daring, even daring to touch a member of my Zhang clan." The second-generation ancestor shouted angrily, raising his eyebrows in shock and fear. "Who knows you?" Ling Han flicked his finger again, and this second-generation ancestor followed in the footsteps of the 4 servants. A bloody hole appeared on his forehead, and he fell to the ground. The passers-by in the surroundings all retreated. This was a serious matter. That was the young master of the Zhang clan, yet he died here. The Zhang clan would definitely be furious, and at that time, whoever was present would be unlucky. They had to run quickly. Ling Han, however, didn't take it to heart. There were pitifully few people in the north region that could make him feel apprehensive. Moreover, didn't he have the princess of the sea race with shocking brute force by his side? When necessary, he could let her train a bit. Let's go. He continued to walk towards the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, while Helian Sun Shui and Hu Niu each held his hand on his left and right. Before entering the city, Ling Han had already changed his appearance, making himself look like a young man of about 25 or 26 years old. This made Helian Sun Shui very surprised, but she saw through him with one look. Obviously, though she temporarily forgot how to circulate her origin power, her eyesight hadn't faded, and was still extremely shocking. Chapter 543. In Ling Han's heart, there was a continuous stream of comprehension, causing him to be unable to contain his joy. He was definitely an extremely intelligent person. The fact that he could become the Alchemy Emperor in his last life was proof of this. Moreover, this was on the basis that he did not have the guidance of anyone else, yet he was still able to obtain such achievements in alchemy. Wasn't this shocking? Now, he applied this kind of comprehension ability to martial arts, and wholeheartedly pursued the pinnacle of martial arts. Inside his body, there was an earth-shattering change happening. It could be hard and soft at the same time, combining both hard and soft. This was something that could be said with a flip of the tongue, but it was really, really difficult to achieve. Because everyone was already used to their current state, but it was very difficult to break a habit. Moreover, to make one's body stretch like the blood-sucking origin gold and possess flexibility, this was a kind of qualitative change. Break one's ego, and reshape one's ego. In his dantian, the tiny figure of the spiritual infant sat on guard, solemn and dignified, forming one mysterious seal after another. The indestructible heaven scroll had long since been branded on the seal, and now the spiritual infant was developing the secret technique, coordinating from the inside to promote Ling Han's transformation. After an unknown amount of time, Ling Han stretched out the index finger of his right hand, grabbed it with his left hand, and gave a sudden tug. If it had been in the past, under his strong tug, his right arm would definitely have stretched out along with it. But now, a strange thing happened. His finger actually became thinner and thinner, and the tugging force was reduced by more than half. However, after the index finger was stretched to a length of 1 foot, it could not be stretched any further. This was the limit. A smile involuntarily appeared at the corners of Ling Han's lips. He had succeeded, he had finally succeeded. Although it was still far from reaching the level of the blood-sucking origin gold, it was still an improvement, a very big improvement. Again. Ling Han was no longer just sitting down. He was continuously waving his arms and kicking his legs. At first, it was very normal, but slowly, the distance between his punches and kicks was actually getting further and further. That was his body stretching. Ling Han's eyes lit up. This was not as simple as dispersing the force, but rather, it could give rise to a completely different battle style. Others would think that one punch could only travel this far before being able to spit out origin power, but in truth, one could actually punch out a distance that was several times or dozens of times that, so it was naturally impossible to defend against. Moreover, if his fists and feet could stretch out endlessly, then wouldn't any battle become a close-quarters battle? One had to know that he had cultivated body arts, so his physique was comparable to rare metal that was 1 tier higher, and his brute force was also very terrifying. With these two added together, who could fight him in close quarters? However, Ling Han immediately discovered his limitations. Without being affected by external forces, the distance he could extend his body was really limited. This was like a spring. In theory, it could be stretched very, very long, but it would definitely be under the influence of an external force. Moreover, when the external force disappeared, it would return to its original state, unless it was torn. Ling Han's original state was the most stable, so no matter how he changed, his body would instinctively and diligently return to this state. What a pity. Ling Han shook his head inwardly. If his body could change like the blood-sucking origin gold under his control, then he would be able to develop a completely different battle style, killing everyone until they were dumbfounded. He couldn't ask for too much. Ling Han smiled. Now, he had already achieved a small success. He went to battle that formation sword again. Ling Han exited the Black Tower. Thankfully, the formation sword did not awaken by itself and attack him on its own. Otherwise, he would be in deep trouble. Come, let's battle again. He laughed loudly, and took the initiative to charge over. Shoo, 7 flashes of sword light shot out from the formation sword, slashing towards him. Ling Han snorted, and his body continued to charge forward. He did not even use the demon fairy step, allowing the 7 flashes of sword light to hit him. Now, he wanted to use this sword to hone that soft side of the indestructible heaven scroll. Piu, in this way, the 7 flashes of sword light naturally slashed him head-on. The clothes on his chest were instantly torn open, and as the sword light slashed downwards, Ling Han's chest was actually stretched backwards by 3 meters, 2 meters, 15 meters. And at this time, the power of the 7 flashes of sword light was finally exhausted. Pang, Ling Han's chest bounced back, and his face was slightly pale. It was one thing to practice by himself, but to play so hard right from the start, he was somewhat unable to bear it. 3 of my bones are still broken, and my internal organs are also slightly injured, he said inwardly. After all, this was a strike from the formation sword, which could be cut even after returning to the deity transformation tier, but he took it head-on, so how could he possibly not pay a price? But what made Ling Han happy was that this time, he didn't retreat in the slightest. He turned his body into countless particles, and the impact of the sword light was all dispersed by his upper body, so the lower half of his body naturally didn't move. It could be done. He surged with strong confidence that he could definitely subdue this treasured sword. Again. The indestructible heaven scroll circulated within his body. The body of Diamond was known to be indestructible, and even if he was heavily injured, it could automatically heal. In merely a short while, his broken bones were already reconnected, as if he had never been injured. He continued to attack, but after all, human strength was limited. After suffering too many slashes from the sword light, he had no choice but to retreat in the end, or else he would really be cut in two. Yet the smile at the corners of Ling Han's lips grew wider and wider. His comprehension in the aspect of gentleness was becoming deeper and deeper. Every attack was an improvement, and the injuries he suffered were also becoming lighter and lighter. He learned to use more particles in his body to disperse the force he had to endure. In fact, it wasn't as simple as pulling himself up, but he could also expand to the left and right. Previously, he had only turned himself into a spring, but now he was like a ball of dough, and not only could he expand in one direction, but he could also expand in any direction. Thus, when his chest was once again struck by the sword light, his whole chest could be seen to expand like water, turning into a sheet of paper. It was incredibly thin, yet it was able to disperse at least 90% of the attack it had received in this way. At this time, the tough side of the sword also showed its power. A mere 10% of the sword's power wanted to injure his physique. His body bounced back and returned to its original state. Ling Han's face was slightly pale. This time, he really wasn't injured, but the state he had been in previously wasn't his normal form, and would cause him a great deal of pressure. The transformed form couldn't be maintained for too long, or else it would also collapse. He thought so, and then laughed in spite of himself. If he could endlessly pull himself up, then wouldn't he be able to easily receive even the attacks of shattering void tier elites? There was a limit to one's strength, and this was in line with the Tao of Heaven. He shook his head, his gaze once again fixed on the formation sword, and said with a smile, "Within 3 moves, I'll definitely subdue you." The thunderclap 9th heaven was unleashed, and he charged out again. Pang, 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 sword light blazed like fire, slashing madly at him. Ling Han was unafraid. Every part of his body swelled up, dispelling the attacks he received. He didn't retreat even half a step, and instead stretched out his right hand, forcibly extending a distance of 3 meters. After receiving 3 rounds of sword light attacks in a row, his hand finally grabbed onto the sword hilt. Hong, a terrifying killing intent instantly rushed into Ling Han's consciousness. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 544. What major event? Ling Han asked. A heaven-grade alchemist obtained the inheritance of the 12 palaces, and knows the whereabouts of a divine treasure trove. Is this considered a major event? Yin Hong asked in response. Ling Han laughed coldly, and said, "This joke is really not funny at all." "Then tell me about a major event that happened in the Middle State," Yin Hong said seriously. "Over a month ago, a mystery realm opened in the Middle State, and many people obtained benefits. There were also many newcomers that had never been heard of that suddenly appeared, and amazed the world with a single brilliant feat." "Oh, what mystery realm?" Ling Han asked casually. As for geniuses and whatnot, he didn't take them to heart. In a battle of the same cultivation level, he was confident that he wouldn't lose to anyone. "Heaven Arena," Yin Hong said. "What mystery realm is that?" Ling Han had never heard of it. "The heavens will select a large group of people to enter the mystery realm, and they'll be divided into 18 groups. They'll pass through layers upon layers of difficulties, and the teams that ultimately advance will engage in a battle to the death. The surviving side will obtain an astonishing reward, and it's even possible for your cultivation to directly increase by 2 or 3 major realms," Yin Hong said. Ling Han was astounded. That was impressive, directly increasing by 2 or 3 major realms, but he immediately shook his head. A true genius wouldn't achieve it in one go, because cultivation needed to be tempered. After all, those who achieved it too quickly wouldn't have a stable foundation. Even if it still didn't affect the advancement of cultivation, they might not be considered an expert in the same cultivation level. Some people should have taken out some good things from the mystery realm. This time, going to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion's headquarters, there will definitely be people taking out treasures that they don't need to auction, Yin Hong continued. Only then did Ling Han reveal an interested expression and nodded. "Then it's indeed worth going. I heard that some newcomers have very strong momentum this time. I'm really worried that they'll be poached away by the other region's branches. At that time, in the martial art competition, we won't have the upper hand," Yin Hong said worriedly. "Oh, you're even stronger than Xian-Er?" Ling Han was a little surprised. After Zhu Xian-Er had recovered from the injury to her divine sense, her strength had advanced rapidly. Firstly, it was because of the rebound, and secondly, Ling Han had given her many alchemical pills, as well as natural treasures like great beast meat and spiritual liquid. It was impossible for her cultivation level to not advance quickly. Yin Hong nodded with a serious expression and said, "Very, very strong. They're all in the flower blossom tier, and 2 of them have even advanced into the high level of the flower blossom tier, and are qualified to challenge the second sword in the world and other king-tier geniuses." To be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Yao Huiyu, only then did Ling Han put on a cautious expression. In a battle of the same cultivation level, he had the confidence to win against Yao Huiyu, but if there was a difference of 4 to 5 cultivation levels between them, then it would be hard to say. After all, not only was Yao Huiyu a super genius, he was also from a great ancient sect, and had many powerful techniques. Although they had fought once before, Ling Han had first relied on the thunder battle armor, and secondly, Yao Huiyu had limited himself to 3 moves. In the end, Yao Huiyu had gone all out on the 3rd move, but it just so happened to be the mysterious 3000, which was why Ling Han had broken through. Therefore, that battle was definitely not a demonstration of Yao Huiyu's true abilities. "Who are those new people?" Ling Han asked. Xia Yuren, Ji Wenshan, Fei Hong, Wu Huayun, Lang Wu Xian. Yin Hong counted with her fingers, really knowing them like the back of her hand. Ling Han frowned, and said, "These are all in the flower blossom tier, all, not even 30 years old, none." Ling Han was shocked. The new people of this generation were really strong. In his last life, probably only he and the Sword Emperor broke through to the flower blossom tier before the age of 30, which was pitifully few. But in this life, countless geniuses appeared as if they had been overturned. No, it wasn't that the geniuses of this generation were stronger, but rather that the environment of martial art in this life was too good. Various mystery realms opened, allowing people to rapidly increase their cultivation level, and the change in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth allowed more natural treasures to appear, causing the entire martial art to develop at an accelerated pace. On such a foundation, there were naturally more geniuses, and they were also stronger. He couldn't help but reveal a smile. Being able to exchange blows with countless geniuses was naturally extremely beneficial in sharpening his battle prowess. Moreover, there was really no meaning in always trampling on random people. "I really want to battle with these people," Ling Han said unhurriedly. I'm sure that some of those people will definitely be recruited by other regions to participate in the Spirit Treasures Pavilion's competition this time, so you have a chance," Yin Hong said. Ling Han laughed mischievously, and said, "I only agreed to participate in the alchemy competition. If you want me to participate in the martial art competition, fine, but add more money." Hey, you're the one who said you want to find them to fight. I'm just creating an opportunity for you." Yin Hong rolled her eyes. "I've never seen someone like you, biting the hand that feeds you, and only thinking about money." Ling Han shook his head, and said, as expected of a businesswoman, "It's obviously a matter of taking advantage, but you make it sound like it's a loss." "Fine, up to you. If you want me to fight, then show me your sincerity." Yin Hong gritted her teeth, and said, 100,000 two-star origin crystals, is your sincerity enough? 2-star origin crystals? I don't accept that kind of trash, Ling Han said disdainfully. He'd already broken through to the flower blossom tier, and 2-star origin crystals were practically useless to him. 1,000 3-star origin crystals. Yin Hong slammed the table as if a piece of flesh was cut off, her face full of pain. "Nyo, do I look like a beggar to you?" Ling Han turned to ask Hunyo. "No." Hunyo was obviously on the same side as him. "Xian what do you think?" he asked Zhu Xian. "Of course not, Brother Han." Zhu Xian immediately said sweetly. Ling Han turned to Helian Sun Shua, and before he could ask, this princess of the sea race said, "Ling Han isn't a beggar." Fine, she knew how to answer first, her intelligence had improved considerably. Ling Han turned around, and said, Everyone says I don't look like a beggar, but why do you use a beggar's method to dismiss me? Aren't you looking down on me?" Yin Hong wanted to punch someone. Who used 1,000 3-star origin crystals to dismiss a beggar? She was the daughter of the pavilion branch master of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, so she was naturally born to do business. She immediately said shamelessly, "Just 1,000, no more, I only have one life. Why don't you sleep with me? With my status, sleeping with you once would cost at least 1,000 3-star origin crystals, and if you sleep with me a few more times, you'd have to pay me back." Ling Han instantly retreated in defeat. Encountering this kind of female pervert, he really felt helpless, like he was facing a hedgehog. He sighed, and said, "You're such a pervert, does your family know? I have big breasts, so what if I act like a pervert?" Yin Hong said very arrogantly. "If the heavens aren't satisfied, then send down a bolt of lightning to subdue me." Hong! Her words had just fallen when a loud noise was immediately heard, like the rumble of thunder. Both horses were so shocked that they raised their hooves in panic, causing the carriage to sway for a while. Yin Hong's pretty face couldn't help but turn pale. Gods were watching, she wouldn't jinx it, and the gods really heard her, right? "That's not right, someone's fighting." Ling Han immediately dashed out. Chapter 545. Ling Han dashed out of the carriage and saw that in the sky not far away, there were two people fighting fiercely. Flying physically, they were at least in the flower blossom tier. Being far away, Ling Han obviously couldn't sense the two's aura and couldn't distinguish their tier, but with his eyesight, he could clearly see their appearance with a glance. They both looked to be in their 20s, extremely young. This wasn't just looking young, but really being young. Majestic blood chi soared into the sky, showing their shocking vitality. The two exchanged another blow. One used a saber, and the other used a sword. With a swing, 19 flashes of saber chi and sword chi crisscrossed as if they were going to cut open the heaven and earth, extremely terrifying. Ling Han was shocked. He only grasped 19 flashes of sword chi, and the two in the sky didn't lose to him. This was too ridiculous, encountering young elites of this level on the road. However, his blood soon boiled and his fighting spirit soared, wanting to go up and fight. Hong, hong, hong. In the sky, the two young elites displayed all their moves. The will of martial arts spread, easily knocking out a spiritual pedestal tier warrior. Flower blossom tier cultivators bloomed the martial art divine flower, which could draw upon the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to increase their attacks. Thus, their destructive power was extremely terrifying. Even if they fought in the sky, the shockwaves from the falling battle could easily slice off mountains, as if the end of the world had arrived. Pang, a mountain peak fell, and just so happened to be smashing towards the top of Ling Han's head. With a slash of his sword, it was split apart, and the mountain peak fell from both sides. Pang, pang, under the terrifying impact, the ground instantly began to shake like a carpet. Ling Han instantly found a reason to fight. So, he also flew into the sky and shouted, "Hey, those two brats dare to use rocks to smash me, sword." He swung his sword, attacking the two at the same time. The two were fighting fiercely, completely not thinking that there was no third party intervening, and couldn't help but be angry. However, Ling Han's sword was also ridiculously powerful, and they had no choice but to parry. They temporarily gave up attacking each other and parried towards Ling Han. Pang! With the two great geniuses joining forces, their battle prowess was simply too terrifying. Even a monster like Ling Han was forced to retreat. However, Ling Han's fighting spirit was blazing. These two people were both in the 7th layer of the flower blossom tier, which was a whole 5 tiers higher than him, who was in the 2nd layer of the flower blossom tier. However, there was not much difference in their battle prowess. This kind of opponent was too rare. How could he be willing to give up? He had finally found a reason to intervene, so there was no way he would leave just like that. He let out a long roar and activated the demon fairy step. The desolate hell sword was unsheathed, and this was the last move. It was as if he had transformed into an Asura who had fallen into hell, and his killing intent was burning the sky. The two of them were both angry and shocked. They were fighting to their heart's content, but they were unexpectedly interrupted. "I'll kill this brat first, then we'll settle the score." "All right." The two of them reached an agreement and joined forces to attack Ling Han. One wielded a sword, drawing forth endless flames, while the other wielded a saber, scattering tens of thousands of rays of golden light, incomparably swift and fierce. Either one of these two great geniuses could practically sweep through the flower blossom tier, and now that the two of them joined forces, it was truly too terrifying. Even someone as strong as Ling Han was suppressed, but this made Ling Han even more excited. Using the demon fairy step, the desolate hell sword didn't change into a defensive stance at all, only a swift and fierce attack after attack. The two of them originally had the intention to kill Ling Han quickly and then fight to their heart's content, but as they fought, their fighting spirit was also aroused. Not only did they go all out, their alliance also collapsed, turning into a 3-way battle royale. They were all geniuses and were confident that they were invincible among their peers, so they disdained to join forces with others to defeat another worthy opponent. In the sky, the fierce battle raged. Rain of fire and golden light fell one after another, as if the world was going to be destroyed. Zhu Xian Air opened a defensive shield. Although she was only in the 7th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, it was more than enough to block the aftermath of the battle between Flower Blossom tier warriors. Hunyo became excited and continuously bared her teeth, seeming to want to join the battle. Meanwhile, Hellion Sun Shue's face was full of panic as she said, "Could Ling Han have been wounded?" "Huh, he deserves to be wounded. Who told him to charge up himself?" Yin Hong said, taking pleasure in his misfortune. "You're a bad person." Hellion Sun Shue pouted. "I have big breasts, so I can be a bad person." Yin Hong stood in front of Hellion Sun Shue with her hands on her hips, and even deliberately stuck out her chest, making Hellion Sun Shue feel embarrassed. How could this woman be so perverted? Ha ha ha. In the sky, the three of them laughed loudly and stopped fighting at the same time. "Delightful. Delightful," the sword wielders said. "I'm Fei Hong, dare I ask how I should address brother?" So he was Fei Hong, a super genius that had recently risen up. He'd heard Yin Hong mention him just now. No wonder, how could there be so many geniuses in the world, encountering them as they walked? "I'm Han Lin," Ling Han said with a smile, and said to the saber wielder, "And this is Lang Wu Xin," this person said somewhat coolly, appearing very cold. But just by looking at his appearance in battle, one would know that when this person was hot-blooded, he was quite scary. Brother Han's name, I've actually never heard of it." Fei Hong revealed a surprised expression. A genius like Brother Han should be famous throughout the world. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "That's why I'm going to the middle state, to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat." Fei Hong laughed as well, while Lang Wu Xin was expressionless, like a wooden man. "He shouldn't be called Wu Xin, but Wu Xiao. You two should be from the middle state, right? Why have you come here?" Ling Han asked. "I arranged to fight with this guy, and fought for half a month. Unknowingly, we fought here," Fei Hong said with a smile. Fighting from the middle state to the north region, these two really knew how to toss things around. "Come, drink." Ling Han was in high spirits, and called the two onto the carriage. He took out the ingredients from the Black Tower, as well as the medicinal wine refined from the various spirit herbs that grew in the Black Tower. This was not only strong, but also very nutritious. Ordinary wine was practically unnoticeable to cultivators, but this medicinal wine was completely different. It was definitely strong enough. After a single cup, Fei Hong's spirits immediately soared, and Lang Wu Xin couldn't help but stretch his wooden face, as if it had gained life. They drank and counted the heroes of the world. "Brother Han, so you're participating in the tournament of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion on behalf of us? Then you have to be careful. I heard that Shenyuan Ziguang will also represent the South region in the tournament." After a few cups of wine, Fei Hong and Ling Han already had their arms around each other's shoulders, calling each other brother. "Is he very strong?" Ling Han asked. He didn't say that he was actually participating in the competition of alchemy. Of course, if he felt like it, he would also consider the competition of martial art. "Very strong," Lang Wu Xin suddenly opened his mouth, and evaluated solemnly. "I am no match for him." Ling Han was surprised. Although Lang Wu Xin basically didn't say much, this kind of person would either not say anything, or whatever he said would definitely hit the nail on the head. Even he admitted that he was no match for Shenyuan Ziguang, which showed that this person was indeed very strong. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.